The first thing my father gave my brother was the land. The second thing he gave him was my absence. We were sitting around the oak table in my parents' kitchen, finishing a pot roast that had surrendered sometime before noon, when Dad pushed his plate away and said, "Eli will take over the farm. No buildup, no throat clearing. Just 400 acres handed across the gravy." My brother stopped chewing. His wife, Tessa, looked down at her napkin. Mom reached for the butter dish even though nobody had asked for it. I waited for the rest. Dad folded his hands over his stomach. The house, the buildings, the equipment. It makes sense to keep the operation together. "What do I get?" I asked. Mom's fingers tightened around the butter dish. "Leah." I'm not asking in a hostile way. I just like to know which branch of the family tree I'm on. Dad stared at the table. Mom answered for him. "You deployed too often to inherit the farm. Eli was the one who stayed." For a few seconds, the only sound in the kitchen was the refrigerator kicking on behind me. Then I looked at the envelope by Dad's elbow, the insurance renewal he had called me about twice while I was driving home, and wondered why a daughter too absent to inherit the farm was still expected to pay to protect it. I had been home 11 hours. My 2 duffel bags were upstairs in the room where I'd slept as a teenager, lined up beneath the window because I hadn't decided which dresser drawers still belonged to me. Mom had put fresh sheets on the bed and left a stack of towels on the chair. The towels smelled like the cedar chest. The room smelled like lemon polish and the lavender sachets she used to keep mice away, which had never worked but had made the mice smell respectable. On the dresser was a framed photograph of Eli and me sitting on the old Massey Ferguson. I was 13, he was 11, and both of us had our hands on the steering wheel. That morning, Dad had met me in the driveway wearing work boots and a canvas jacket that used to be brown. He hugged me with one arm because the other shoulder had been bad since a grain bin accident in 2018. "Home for good," he'd said. That's the rumor. He'd held me out at arm's length and studied my face as if retirement from the Guard ought to have changed its basic arrangement. "You look tired." "I drove 9 hours. You always hated driving." "I drove military trucks in 3 countries. Still hated it, didn't you?" That was Dad. He could make affection sound like a workplace complaint. Mom had come out wiping her hands on a dish towel, though she hadn't been cooking anything. She hugged me longer than Dad did, then asked whether I still drank coffee. I had spoken to her the previous Sunday while holding a cup of it. Eli arrived from the west field near lunchtime, climbing down from the farm truck with a grease mark on his cheek and a pair of gloves shoved into his back pocket. He was 39 now, broader than I remembered, and grayer at the temples than he had any right to be. For half a second, we just looked at each other. Then he smiled. "You finally got discharged for insubordination? Chronic old age, that'll do it." He hugged me hard enough to aggravate my shoulder. I didn't tell him. The pain went bright and clean down my arm, and I turned it into a laugh. Tessa had brought over a chocolate pie. She was compact, careful, and always looked as if she had remembered an appointment nobody else knew about. She kissed my cheek, told me my hair was shorter, then asked if I wanted to see the new bookkeeping software before supper. "Romance me first," I said. "I brought pie. You've still got it." Everything that afternoon had felt close to normal. Not normal exactly, but like a machine running after a long winter, stiff in places, noisy, yet basically willing. Eli showed me the planter monitor he'd upgraded. Dad complained about the price of diesel. Mom moved around all of us with the frantic cheerfulness of a woman afraid somebody might leave before dessert. Then she said I had deployed too often to inherit the farm. I looked at Eli. He had finally stopped chewing, but he still hadn't said anything. "Did you know about this?" I asked. His gaze slid toward Dad. "We've talked some." "That's not what she asked," Tessa said. Her voice was quiet. It always was. Quiet from Tessa didn't mean gentle. It meant she was giving you one last opportunity to answer correctly. Eli rubbed the side of his jaw. "I knew Dad wanted to keep the place intact. And I'm apparently a wrecking ball? Nobody said that. You all got together and decided I was too gone to count. I'm trying to understand how that keeps anything intact." Dad exhaled through his nose. Don't turn this into one of your interrogations. My interrogations generally had worse coffee. This isn't funny, Leah. No, it's really not. Mom set the butter down with a soft, deliberate thud. Your father has spent months worrying over this. Did the worrying happen before or after he asked me about the insurance premium? Dad's face changed just enough to answer. Eli looked at the envelope. What insurance premium? The annual farm package. Property, equipment, liability. It went up. I know it went up. I'm asking why Dad called you. Dad straightened in his chair. Because she said she'd help. When? Tessa asked. Back in April? I leaned against my chair. March. Dad's eyes came to me. It was March, I said. You called while I was at Fort Hood. You said the renewal was going to hurt cash flow and you asked if I could cover it after I came home. Dad's mouth pinched. That was before. Before what? Before we settled things. I almost admired the neatness of it. My money had been requested when my future was still conveniently unsettled. Mom began stacking plates, though Eli still had food on his. We don't need to go over every little thing tonight. Tessa put one hand on her plate to keep Mom from taking it. I think we probably do. Mom released the plate. I meant emotions are high. My emotions are sitting right here eating roast, Eli said. It surprised a laugh out of me. A short one, but real. Mom looked betrayed by it. Humor had always irritated her during family fights because it suggested the fight wasn't following her agenda. Dad tapped one thick finger against the table. Eli has worked this land every day for nearly 20 years. I know. He's been here for every planting and every harvest. I know. When the tractor breaks at 2 a.m, he's the one in the shed. I looked at the black grease still caught along Eli's thumbnail. I know that too. Dad's voice rose anyway. He stayed. Eli shifted in his chair. There it was again. Stayed. A simple word with good boots on. A word that came in through the back door carrying a lunch pail. Stayed meant dependable. Stayed meant loyal. Nobody ever asked what made staying possible. I could have answered then. I could have taken the whole family history apart bolt by bolt and laid every piece on the table beside the cold green beans. Instead, training took over. Not combat training, not anything dramatic. Just 19 years of learning not to make an irreversible move because one man raised his voice. So I asked, is this final? Dad didn't hesitate. Yes, Mom did. Her eyes flicked toward him before she said, it's what's fair. Tessa stared at her. Eli stared at his plate. I nodded once. Dad seemed unsettled by that. He had prepared himself for shouting, maybe tears. He'd not prepared for me to receive an instruction. Okay, I said. Mom sat back down. Okay? You answered me. Leah, don't do that thing where you go cold. I'm not cold. You sound cold. I'm tired. I've been home 11 hours and 6 of them were apparently a probationary period. Dad shoved his chair back an inch. Nobody is throwing you out. This is your home. No, you just explained that it's Eli's home. It will be, Eli said, finally looking at me. Someday. That doesn't mean you're not welcome. Welcome. The word landed worse than absent. Guests were welcome. Delivery drivers were welcome. The minister was welcome if Dad saw his car in time to hide the bourbon. I had spent nearly 2 decades thinking I was returning to something that was mine, and my brother was offering me good visiting privileges. Tessa closed her eyes briefly. I stood and gathered my plate. Sit down, Dad said. I'm taking this to the sink. We're not finished. You said the decision was final. That's usually what finished means. His expression hardened. We still need to talk about spring. Of course we did. I carried my plate to the counter and ran water over it. Behind me, chairs creaked. Nobody left. The kitchen window over the sink reflected all 5 of us back at me. Dad rigid at the head of the table, Mom small and worried beside him, Eli bent forward with his hands clasped, Tessa watching everybody, and me standing beneath a wooden sign that said, "Bless this mess" in Mom's careful blue paint. Dad cleared his throat. The combine is making that knocking sound again. I kept rinsing the plate. What kind of knocking sound? Same as last fall. That wasn't a knocking sound. That was a bearing asking for last rites. Eli said, I replaced it. You replaced the bearing. Did you check the shaft? A pause. No, he said. Then you replaced the warning. Dad seized on my answer as if nothing had happened. You can look at it tomorrow. I turned off the faucet. Mom's shoulders relaxed. That was the old rhythm. A family problem entered the room, Leah fixed it, and nobody had to name what had happened before the problem arrived. I can't tomorrow, I said. You have an appointment? Dad asked. No. Then what do you mean you can't? I mean, I'm not available. His eyebrows climbed. You just got home. Yes. You said you wanted to work on the farm. I said I wanted to come home and take my place on the farm. It's a combine, Leah, not a marriage proposal. Good. Then it won't take the rejection personally. Eli pushed his chair back. I'll handle the combine. Dad turned on him. If you could handle it, it wouldn't still be knocking. The cruelty was casual, almost efficient. Eli's face didn't change, which told me it had happened before. I dried my plate and put it in the cabinet to the left of the sink. Mom had kept the dishes in the same place since 1996. Some things, apparently, could survive uninterrupted. Dad reached for the insurance envelope. Fine. We'll talk tomorrow when everybody's calmer. No need, I said. I'm not paying it. Mom stared at me. You promised. I promised. When I thought I was investing in our farm. It is our farm. Then why can't I inherit it? Her mouth opened, but Dad answered. Because you weren't here. A memory came so fast I smelled hot metal and desert dust. I was sitting outside a maintenance bay at 2 a.m, holding a phone against my ear while Dad told me the barn roof was gone and the adjuster wouldn't cover half of it. Behind him, I could hear Eli swearing in the wind. Dad had said, if that slot's still open, maybe you ought to take it. I set the dish towel down. Eli was watching me now, and something uneasy moved across his face. Not recognition exactly, the shadow that comes before it. Dad slapped the envelope against the table. So this is punishment. No, looks like punishment. It's clarification. Mom's eyes had gone wet. After everything this family has done for you. I looked at her, then at Dad, then at the brother who had once known exactly why I left. I'm just trying to understand the new arrangement, I said. If I'm family when the bill comes and a visitor when the land gets divided, I need to know which person you expect me to be. Nobody answered. Upstairs, beneath the window, my duffel bags were still packed. For the first time since I'd carried them into the house, that struck me as useful. Mom followed me upstairs carrying the chocolate pie. She didn't knock. She never had, though she did pause in the doorway long enough to create the impression that she might start. I was sitting on the floor beside my duffel bags, trying to remember which one held my civilian clothes. After years of packing by category and urgency, retirement had reduced the system to one bag marked important and one bag marked also important. Mom set the pie on my old desk. You left before dessert. I lost my appetite somewhere around the real estate discussion. I wish you wouldn't call it that. What should I call it? She folded her arms. Family planning. That sounds worse. Her lips twitched. She fought it, which almost made me smile, too. Almost. Your father could have handled it better, she said. He could have hired a barbershop quartet to sing it. The content would have stayed pretty much the same. He's not good with difficult conversations. He's 72. How much practice does he need? She turned toward the dresser. Her hand moved automatically to straighten the photograph of Eli and me on the tractor, though it was already straight. You know how your father is? Yes. Does he know how anybody else is? That's not fair. Good. I'd hate to introduce a new theme this late in the evening. She looked at me then. Mom's eyes were a pale gray that could seem blue when she was happy. They looked almost colorless now. We are happy you're home. I believe you. Do you? Yes. You're happy I'm here. You just don't think here belongs to me." Her chin tightened. "Land isn't love." "No, but apparently attendance is. That isn't what I meant. It's what you said." Mom moved to the bed and smoothed the comforter beside her before sitting down. The mattress gave a familiar squeak. When I was 17, I'd learned exactly which corner I could sit on without waking anybody after I came home late. It was a skill with no peacetime application. "Eli has given his whole life to this place," she said. "He has." "You say that like you don't mean it." "I mean it completely. That's the problem. I can see what he gave without pretending I gave nothing. Nobody said nothing. You gave me jewelry and visiting rights. The jewelry was my mother's. That does improve the offer." She rubbed the heel of her hand against her forehead. "Why do you always have to make a joke? Because if I say the serious version, you'll cry." "I'm already close," I noticed. She let out a tired breath. Downstairs, a cabinet door shut harder than necessary. Dad making sure everyone knew he was not listening. Mom glanced toward the hallway. "The insurance is due next week. I assume the date didn't change during supper. If it lapses, it won't lapse. Dad and Eli will pay it. You know things are tight. Then you shouldn't be expanding." The room went still. Mom lowered her hand. "Who told you about that?" "Nobody." There was an acreage map on the counter with Eli's handwriting all over it. The west parcels were circled, and Dad gets hives from adding land. It wasn't hard. They have an opportunity to rent the Voss ground. "With what equipment?" "Your father thinks." "I know what he thinks. He thinks I'll repair the combine, cover the insurance, and spend the spring running equipment on land I'm not responsible enough to inherit. You said you wanted to farm." "I did. Not volunteer. That word is ugly. It usually gets prettier when the person volunteering chooses it." Mom stood. Her cheeks had gone pink. "Your brother never kept track of every hour he worked here." "No, he gets the farm. That isn't why." "Then stop using his work as the reason." She picked up the pie again. For one hopeful second, I thought she was taking it with her. Instead, she pressed it into my hands. "I am not discussing this when you're determined to twist everything." "Mom." She stopped at the door without turning. "Did Dad discuss the insurance with you before tonight?" Her shoulders rose. "That's what I thought," I said. "He believed you'd want to help. So did you. You always have." She left, closing the door with more care than the moment deserved. I stared at the pie in my hands. Mom had pre-sliced it into 8 pieces. The whipped cream was already beginning to separate around the edges. A minute later, somebody knocked. "Come in." Tessa opened the door, saw the pie, and said, "I was wondering where my good Pyrex went. Your mother-in-law used it as a delivery vehicle for guilt. She'd better not scratch it." She stepped inside and closed the door. In one hand, she held 2 forks. That's disturbingly prepared. I've been married into this family for 12 years. We sat on the floor with the pie between us. Tessa removed the plastic lid and handed me a fork. "Mom thinks dessert should happen at a table," I said. "Carol thinks all dangerous activity should happen at a table, harder for people to escape." We each took a bite directly from separate slices. The crust was a little too thick. It was still the best thing I'd eaten all day. Tessa swallowed and looked toward my bags. "Are you leaving? I haven't unpacked." That wasn't my question. "I don't know." She nodded as if I had confirmed something. "What did you think was going to happen tonight?" I asked. "I thought Wade was going to say Eli would manage the farm and the 2 of you would own it together." "Why?" "Because that's what Eli told me." I set my fork down. "When?" "Not tonight. Over the years." She picked at the edge of her pie. "Whenever I asked why you were sending money or buying parts or paying for things that weren't yours yet, he said they would be yours. Both of yours." My shoulder began to ache again. It did that when I was tired, angry, cold, or alive. Did he know Dad's decision? He knew Wade was leaning that way. I don't know when leaning became decided, but he didn't warn me. No. Her answer came without protection. I liked her for it and hated needing to. Did you tell him to? I told him if he let you walk into that supper blind, he'd regret it. Is he regretting it? He's in the machine shed. That could mean anything. He took the bearing housing apart. That means he's upset. Tessa smiled faintly. That's what I figured. I scraped whipped cream from the plastic edge. You should know I'm not trying to take his work away from him. I do. Does he? Not tonight. Before I could answer, footsteps crossed the hall. The door opened halfway and Eli leaned against the frame. Are you two holding a separate meeting? Tessa lifted her fork. Pie inspection. You took the whole thing. Your mother brought it. His eyes moved to me. Can I talk to my sister? You can talk to her with me sitting here. Tess, I'm comfortable. I picked up the pie and put it on the desk. It's fine. Tessa stood, wiped her fork on a napkin, and handed it to Eli as she passed him. For when you get hungry. He watched her leave. She's mad at me. She brought a fork for you. There's hope. He closed the door and remained standing. I said, if you're here to tell me Dad didn't mean it, he meant it. Good start. Eli turned the fork over in his hand. I didn't know he was going to say it like that. What wording would have helped? I don't know. Maybe a riddle. Give me 3 guesses. Can you stop? No. He sat on the desk chair. It was too small for him now, and his knees came up awkwardly. I remembered him using that chair to practice tying knots while I studied for my enlistment test. I should have called you, he said. Yes. I kept thinking Dad would change his mind. Why? Because you were coming home. That was the evidence against me. Eli looked at the floor. He's gotten harder about things. Has he or have you gotten better at letting him speak first? His head came up. You've been home half a day, and I already know he talks to you like you're an employee he can't fire. That's between me and him. Everything is between you and him until the bill gets forwarded to me. His mouth flattened. There it is. What? You think money is the same as being here? No. Dad thinks being here is the same as owning everything. I worked this farm while you were gone. I know. You say you know, but you don't. You weren't here when he couldn't walk after the auger accident. You didn't spend 6 weeks helping him shower. No. I was in Kuwait. You didn't watch Mom sit in the truck and cry because we couldn't make the machinery payment. No. I was in Afghanistan. You didn't have him calling you useless every time rain put us 3 days behind. No. He only called me when he needed money. Eli stood so quickly the chair rolled back into the desk. You think I asked you to go? The room seemed to contract around us. I looked at him. His face changed before I said anything. Not much. Just a flicker near his mouth. There and gone. You did, I said. That's not what I meant. You called me after the barn fire. We were desperate. You said the Kuwait slot was only 9 months and the extra pay would replace the combine. I didn't order you to take it. No, you cried. He turned away. Eli almost never cried. He had cried that night in short, furious breaths, trying to hide it beneath wind noise while a section of the barn roof flapped behind him like loose canvas. I continued, quieter. You said you couldn't do it alone. I couldn't. So I went. That was one time. It wasn't, but I let the sentence sit there. He pressed both hands to the back of his neck. What do you want me to say? That Dad should cut the place in half and make it impossible to run? No. That I should hand over everything I've built because you came home? No. Then what? I wanted you to tell him the truth before he made my service sound like a vacation I took from responsibility. Eli turned back. His eyes were red, though that might have been anger. What truth? He asked. That neither of us kept this place alive alone. He looked at the photograph on the dresser. For a moment, I thought he might pick it up. Instead, he walked to the door. The combine still needs fixing, he said. I know, I can do it. I know that too. He left the door open behind him. I didn't sleep much. Around 4, I gave up and dressed in the dark. The farmhouse stairs knew exactly where to creak, so I stepped over the 3rd one and avoided the edge of the 7th. Outside, the yard was silver with frost. The machine shed door stood open. Eli was asleep in a folding chair beside the combine, his jacket zipped to his chin. The shaft lay on the workbench, and the failed bearing housing had been arranged beside it in careful order. He had found the damage. I stood there long enough to feel proud of him, which was inconvenient. Then I noticed my red toolbox beneath the bench. My name was still painted across the lid in white block letters. A yellow rental map lay on top of it, weighed down by a socket. The west parcels were circled. In the margin beside the projected insurance payment, Dad had written one word: Leah. I lifted the map by one corner and slid my toolbox out from under it. The latch squeaked. It had always squeaked, even after I oiled it, which offended me on a professional level. Inside, the top tray held a mix of tools I'd bought with my first guard paycheck and newer pieces I'd sent home over the years. Half-inch sockets, combination wrenches, a multimeter with a cracked rubber sleeve, 3 screwdrivers, and 1 pair of pliers that belonged to no one, because everyone denied buying anything that cheap. Behind me, Eli snorted awake. His boots hit the floor before his eyes fully opened. One hand grabbed the arm of the folding chair, and the other reached toward the workbench. "Easy," I said. "Missouri remains under friendly control." He blinked at me, then at the open toolbox. "What time is it?" 4:40. "Why are you awake? Your chair looks comfortable." "Thought I'd see if you'd share." He dragged a hand over his face. A crease ran from his cheek to his jaw where his head had rested against his jacket collar. "You taking that?" he asked. "It's mine. I meant the map." "No." His eyes went to it anyway. The paper still lay where I'd found it, Dad's block letters visible beside the figure Tessa had penciled in. Eli stood and stretched until his back popped. "He does that. Writes my name on other people's bills? Plans before he talks to anybody. He talked to me. He just skipped the part where paying for the expansion and owning the farm were separate decisions. It's not an expansion yet. The Voss ground is circled. Circles aren't binding. In this family, they're usually stage 1. He stepped over to the workbench and moved the map aside. I told him the numbers were too tight. What did he say? That I worry too much. Classic Wade. If the numbers don't agree, accuse them of anxiety. Eli almost smiled. He picked up the shaft and turned it under the hanging light. The wear mark ran unevenly around the metal. I found the scoring. I saw. I can polish it. You can. He looked over at me. But? I didn't say but. You have a but face. My face has been through a lot. Don't assign it extra duties. He set the shaft down. It's too deep, isn't it? I leaned against the bench, careful not to touch the part. What do you think? I think if I smooth it and use the new bearing, it'll run. For how long? He exhaled. There's the but. The bearing failed because the shaft's worn. If you make the shaft smaller, you haven't solved the reason it moves. A replacement takes 10 days. If you can find one, we need it sooner. You don't need the combine in February. We need to know it works. That sounded less like Eli and more like Dad. I folded my arms. Then send the shaft to Dalton machine. They can build it up and turn it back to spec. That'll cost. Yes. Mechanical repairs continue their long-standing campaign against free enterprise. He rubbed a thumb over the score. Would you do that? I just told you. I mean, if it was yours. There was no clean answer to that. It was my family's combine. It was the machine my money had helped buy. It was also sitting on a farm I'd been told did not belong to me. If it were my responsibility, I said, I'd send it to Dalton. The distinction landed. Eli nodded once. A truck door slammed outside. Dad came through the shed carrying 2 travel mugs, moving with the stiff, slightly rolling gait the auger injury had left him. His eyes took in Eli, the shaft, my open toolbox, and me. Good, he said. You found it. Eli looked at me. I found it, he told Dad. Dad handed him a mug. Leah show you what to look for? No, I told him to send it to Dalton, I said. Dad frowned at the shaft. They'll charge $600 to touch it. Probably. You can do it. Not without a lathe. Call Mike Dalton. He'll let you use his. He might. I'm not asking. Dad held out the second mug to me. When I didn't take it, he set it beside my toolbox. You two made your point last night, he said. What point was that? I asked. That you're upset. I don't think Eli and I made the same point. Eli stared into his coffee. Dad picked up the rental map. I was going to discuss the Voss place with everybody this morning. After you'd settled who counts as everybody, his jaw worked. We can't just stop running the farm because your feelings are bruised. No one asked you to. We've got opportunities. That ground borders ours, and if we don't rent it, Larkin will. Then let Larkin. Dad looked genuinely shocked. In his personal theology, letting a neighbor farm available land fell somewhere between adultery and selling tools at a yard sale. Voss is good ground, he said. It's wet on the south end, access is bad, and you don't have enough combine. We will when this is fixed. You have enough people? You're home. There it was, plain as sunrise. I closed my toolbox and fastened the latches. Dad watched my hands. Where are you going with that? I don't know yet. It stays here. My name is on it. Because I painted it there. I bought the box. For the farm. With my first drill check. Dad gave a sharp laugh. That was 20 years ago. Half the tools in there came out of this shop. Then show me which ones and I'll leave them. You're being ridiculous. Eli set his mug down. She bought most of them. Dad turned on him. Stay out of it. I'm apparently getting the toolbox too. I'd like to know what's in it. The humor in Eli's voice had teeth. Dad stared at him. Send the shaft to Dalton. That's what I said. And fix the hydraulic leak on the 7810. I know. Dad folded the map under his arm and walked out. The coffee he'd brought me steamed beside the toolbox. He had put cream in it, no sugar. He remembered exactly how I took it. I hated him a little for that. Eli picked up the travel mug and offered it to me. No sense wasting coffee. I'm pretty sure that's how they get you. Take one drink, and next thing you know, you're paying the property taxes. I took it. Mom was making biscuits when we came into the kitchen. Flour covered the front of her apron and one side of her nose. Tessa sat at the table with a laptop open, a calculator beside it, and the insurance envelope in front of her. Dad stood at the counter, eating bacon directly from the paper towel where it was draining. Tessa glanced at my toolbox. Morning. Mom turned and saw it. Why are you carrying that? I'm taking it with me. To where? My truck, initially. She wiped both hands on her apron. You can't haul all your things out every time there's a disagreement. It's one toolbox. It's what it means. I put it beside the back door. What does it mean? That you're leaving again. Nobody spoke. Mom's face changed as soon as she heard herself, but she didn't take it back. I set the travel mug on the counter. That's an efficient way to win every argument. I didn't mean you did. Dad reached for another piece of bacon. Tessa closed her laptop with enough force to make him pause. The Voss ground doesn't work, she said. Dad chewed. We're not discussing that now. We're all standing here because of it. It works if we get the yield Eli projected. It works if everything goes right, the combine doesn't fail, diesel stays down, and Leah pays the insurance. Dad's eyes hardened. She said she would. Under circumstances you changed without telling her. Mom turned to Tessa. This is a family matter. Tessa's eyebrows rose. I'm married to your son. You know what I mean. I honestly don't. Eli came in behind me. His gaze moved from Tessa to Dad to the envelope. What's the total? He asked. Tessa opened the laptop again. For the full package, $28,600. He whistled softly. Last year was $22. The roof claim and the wind damage raised it. Dad said, We know that. Then why are we acting like Leah refusing is an emotional problem instead of a budget problem? Mom slid the biscuit tray into the oven and shut the door harder than necessary. Dad pointed a strip of bacon at me. The military gave you steady pay while this farm fed the family. I felt something inside me go very quiet. The military didn't give me anything, I said. It paid me for work. You know what I mean. I'm starting to think none of you do. The phone rang in the small alcove beside the pantry. Mom grabbed it, grateful for the interruption. Mercer residence. She listened, then looked at me. Yes, she's here. Another pause. I don't know what her plans are. Mom held out the receiver. It's June Bell. I took it. The cord had been stretched into a permanent spiral from decades of pacing. Morning, June. Is it? Her voice was low and dry. My tractor has poured its steering fluid onto the barn floor like it's making a statement. That's usually not a statement, more of a confession. I heard you were back. I looked at Mom. News traveled fast in our part of the county, but Mom had apparently helped it put on shoes. Got in yesterday. You looking for work, or are you working for Wade? The kitchen went still enough that everyone could hear her through the receiver. I'm looking, I said. Good. I don't want a favor, and I don't accept charity. I pay the same rate as the dealership unless you're slower than they are. I'm not. I remember. Come look at it when you can. I can be there in an hour. Dad dropped the bacon onto his plate. You have work here. I covered the mouthpiece, though June had almost certainly heard him. No, I said. You have work here. I lifted my toolbox and carried it out to my truck. The frost had begun to soften under the morning sun. Across the yard, the shed door stood open, framing the combine, the workbench, and the empty patch of concrete where my tools had been. Mom came onto the porch as I started the engine. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. I lowered the window. You're coming back for supper, she said. It wasn't quite a question. I don't know. Her mouth tightened. June Bell is a hard woman. So am I, according to everyone inside. That isn't what I said. No, you said I leave. I pulled out before she could answer. At the end of the lane, I checked the mirror. Mom was still on the porch, growing smaller behind me. The farmhouse stood exactly where it always had. For once, I was leaving because I had somewhere of my own to go. June Bell's place sat 6 miles north of ours, past a creek that flooded whenever somebody upstream sneezed. Her mailbox leaned toward the road as if exhausted by government correspondence. I turned onto the gravel lane and found her standing outside the barn in insulated coveralls, holding a red shop rag and looking personally offended by the tractor. June was 64, narrow as a fence post, with iron gray hair cut at her chin. Her husband Warren had died 3 years earlier, and people had spent the first year waiting for her to sell. Then they spent the second year explaining why she ought to sell. By the third, they had mostly learned to discuss it somewhere else. She pointed at my truck bed. You brought tools. I try to create a professional illusion. You charge for the illusion? Only if it works. Good. The dealer charges whether it works or not. The tractor was an older John Deere with faded paint and a cab door held open by a length of baling twine. A dark pool had spread beneath the front end. June had put a shallow feed pan under the worst drip, but most of the fluid had ignored it. When did it start? I asked. Yesterday afternoon. Steering got heavy when I was moving hay. You keep driving? Only far enough to get it inside. That was almost responsible. Don't tell anybody. I opened my toolbox on a rolling cart beside the tractor. The familiar arrangement of the tools settled me more than it should have. There were places in the world where every object still had a purpose nobody argued about. June stood over my shoulder while I traced the wet line. You supervise everybody this close? I asked. I want to know what broke. You want to make sure I'm not inventing parts. That too. I wiped the hose clean, started the engine, and had her turn the wheel while I watched. Fluid beaded along a cracked section near the fitting, then ran down the line. There, I said. June shut the tractor off. Hose? Hose and probably the fitting. It's been rubbing against that bracket. She bent close. Can you fix it? I can replace it. Today? If Reed's has the hose, I called them. They do. I looked at her. You called for the part before you called me? I described the symptoms. Danny said it was probably a steering hose. Danny also once diagnosed a dead battery by replacing an alternator. He told me that was an electrical strategy. That's why his father keeps him away from the cash register. June's mouth twitched. Warren used to say you couldn't trust a man who called guessing a strategy. She said his name without ceremony. No pause, no invitation to comfort her. Just a fact that still lived in the barn. I removed the hose, capped the openings, and set the damaged line on the cart. My shoulder protested when I reached around the axle. I adjusted my position and kept working. June noticed. "What did you do to your arm?" "Got old." "You're 40-something." 41. "I have canned peaches older than you." "That feels like a separate storage problem." She picked up the damaged hose. "Military?" "Partly." "You seeing anybody for it?" "I saw plenty of people. They all agreed it was attached." June examined me with the same suspicion she'd given the tractor. "You Mercers use jokes like sandbags," she said. "For flooding? For anything you don't want getting through." I slid out from beneath the axle. "I need to go to Reed's. I'll come. I know where it is. I'm paying for the part. You can reimburse me. I'm coming." The truck ride into town took 12 minutes. June spent 4 of them complaining about a radio preacher, and the rest asking pointed questions about my retirement. She didn't ask whether I had seen combat, killed anyone, or come back different. People who had never served tended to ask one of those 3 eventually, usually with the hopeful expression of someone waiting for a good television episode. Instead, she asked, "You got enough years for benefits?" "Yes." "You planning to sit around?" "No." "Good. You'd become unbearable by Wednesday." Reed's Farm Supply occupied a cinder block building behind the grain elevator. Danny Reed was at the parts counter eating powdered donuts over an open catalog. He brushed sugar from his shirt when we entered, which only redistributed it. "Well, I heard you were back," he said. "I heard you're an electrical strategist." June put the hose on the counter. Danny looked at her. "She was warned," he said. He found the replacement in a back room. While he was crimping the fittings, my phone buzzed in my jacket. "Eli." I let it ring twice before answering. "What's up?" "Dalton can take the shaft today." "That's good. Mike says if it's there before noon, he can put it ahead of a job he's starting. Then you should get moving." A pause. "Where are you?" "Reed's." "That's halfway to Dalton." There it was. The little bridge from information to obligation. "I'm working. You could drop it off on your way." "I'm with June. I thought you were just looking at a tractor." "That's work when somebody pays you." His breath came through the phone. "Fine." "Eli." "What?" "Don't polish the shaft before you take it. Mike needs to see the full wear pattern." "I know." He didn't, but he would now. "Anything else?" I asked. "No." "Then I'll see you later." He hung up before answering. June watched Danny crimp the hose. "Family?" "Brother." "He discovered you own a truck. He's known for years. He's still processing the implications." Danny set the finished hose on the counter. "You doing mechanic work now?" "I'm doing this job. I've got 3 farmers who'd sell a kidney for somebody who makes house calls." 4, June said. "I've still got both mine, but I'd like to keep them." I gave Danny my number and told him not to promise anyone anything. By the time we returned to June's place, 2 people had already called. The new hose fit. I added fluid, bled the system, and checked the bracket. The original protective sleeve had worn through, so I cut a piece of rubber from an old mud flap and secured it at the contact point. June climbed into the cab and turned the wheel from stop to stop. "Feels right," she said. "Try driving before you marry it." She took the tractor around the barn, disappeared behind a grain bin, and returned with more speed than necessary. "You always drive like that?" I asked. "Only after repair bills." I checked for leaks again. Dry. June pulled a small ledger from her coat pocket. "What do I owe you?" I told her the time and mileage. She wrote a check on the hood of the tractor, using her glove to smooth the paper. "You forgot the part," she said. "You paid Reed's. I mean the rubber and clamps. That was scrap. Scrap still belongs to somebody. Apparently I'm unclear on that concept." She looked up from the check. "Wade giving you trouble?" "Why would you ask? Your toolbox is in your truck instead of his shed." Nothing escaped a farm woman with a clear line of sight. He and I have a difference of opinion. About? The future. That's usually where differences live. She tore out the check and handed it to me. The amount was $30 higher than I'd quoted. "This is too much." "No, it isn't. I know what I charge." "You didn't charge for diagnosis. That was part of the hour. You drove for parts." "That was also part of the hour. Then keep the extra for arguing." I held the check out. She folded my fingers over it. "I don't underpay people because they're neighbors. Makes for bad work and worse neighbors." The words hit somewhere tender. June walked toward the barn office and motioned for me to follow. Inside, a propane heater ticked beside a battered metal desk. Planting charts were pinned to the wall. Every field had a handwritten note beside it. Drainage, seed variety, yield, weeds. Nothing fancy, nothing careless. She opened a cabinet and pulled out a legal pad. "I have 280 acres," she said. 190 owned, the rest rented. Good soil except the East 40, which grows rocks as a cover crop. I remember. Warren handled machinery. I handled crops and books. Since he died, I've been paying the dealership to take 3 days longer than promised, and I'm tired of being grateful when they show up. "You need a full-time mechanic? I need someone who can look at the whole operation and tell me what's going to fail before I'm standing in a field watching smoke." I leaned against the desk. "That sounds like management." "It is. I came home to farm. You're standing on one. My family's farm." June's expression didn't change. "Is that what they're calling it?" I looked through the office window toward my truck. My red toolbox sat behind the cab, bright against the black bed liner. "What exactly are you offering?" I asked. "Paid work. Start with an equipment inventory and spring plan. If we don't hate each other by planting, we talk about a percentage tied to what you improve. You don't know how I work. I watched you fix one hose. That proves I can fix one hose. You showed me the leak, told me the cost before you started, used scrap instead of selling me a bracket I didn't need, and tried to return money. You make poor judgment sound flattering. I'm not offering you the farm, Leah. I'm offering you a job. The bluntness should have embarrassed me. Instead, it cleared the air. I need a couple days. Take them. My family may need me." June put the legal pad back in the cabinet. "Needing you appears to be well established." On my way out, she handed me the old steering hose. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "Keep it." "Why?" "So next time somebody tells you a leak started this morning, you can show them what 3 years of rubbing looks like." I put the hose beside my toolbox. My phone showed 2 missed calls from Dad and 1 text from Tessa. "Don't come home hungry." Carol burned the biscuits and is treating it like a death in the family. I drove back with June's check in my pocket, the cracked hose rattling behind me, and the uncomfortable knowledge that in 4 hours she had asked more clearly for my labor than my family had in 19 years. Dad was waiting in the driveway. He stood with his hands in his jacket pockets while I parked. Eli's truck was gone, which meant he had managed to deliver the shaft without military support. Dad nodded toward my truck bed. "You fixed June's tractor?" "Yes." "She pay you?" "Yes." His face tightened, as if both answers had disappointed him. "I called twice. I was under a machine. We have machines here, so I noticed." He walked to the tailgate and looked at my toolbox. "You really took it." I said I would. "You planning to work for half the county now? I'm considering an offer from June." Dad gave a short, humorless laugh. "June Bell can't offer you a future." I shut the truck door. "Neither did you." For once, my father had no immediate reply. Then his gaze shifted past me to the road where Eli's truck was turning into the lane. The repaired future of the combine sat days away at Dalton Machine. The insurance was still due, and the Voss map was probably already back on the kitchen table. Dad looked older in the afternoon light. "Your mother moved your pie to the fridge," he said. It was as close as he could come to asking me inside. I took my toolbox from the truck, but I carried it upstairs. The toolbox spent the night at the foot of my bed like an ugly red guard dog. Every time I woke, I saw its outline against the window and remembered it hadn't been upstairs since I was 19. Dad had insisted tools belonged near work. Apparently that rule had lasted longer than my claim to the work itself. At breakfast, Mom served the surviving biscuits split open beneath sausage gravy. The burned ones sat in the sink under a layer of water, hidden like evidence. Dad read the farm section of the newspaper. Tessa worked at her laptop. Eli ate standing at the counter, still in yesterday's clothes. Mike says the shaft will be ready Monday, he said. That's quick, I answered. He said you were right about building it up. Dad turned a page. $600 to tell us what we knew. Eli looked at him. We didn't know. I knew it needed repair. You wanted Leah to polish it. That would have gotten another season. It might have gotten another week. Dad folded the paper with slow precision. You two enjoy being on the same side all of a sudden? I'm on the side where the combine doesn't tear itself apart, Eli said. Tessa kept her eyes on the laptop, but one corner of her mouth moved. Mom set a bowl of gravy on the table. Leah said June offered her work. I said I was considering it. You're retired, Dad said. There's work here. I'm retired from the Guard, not from earning money. We can pay you when the crop comes in. That isn't pay. That's optimism. We've always settled up. The room went quiet enough to hear Tessa's keyboard stop clicking. I looked at Dad. Have we? His face reddened. Mom pulled out her chair. Can we please eat one meal without circling back to the same subject? We haven't left the subject, I said. Eli set down his coffee. We need to decide about Voss before Friday. Dad opened the newspaper again. I already decided. No, you circled a map. I told Voss we're interested. Interested isn't signed. It will be. Tessa turned her laptop so Eli could see the screen. Not unless the rent drops or we take less ground. Dad didn't look. The north section balances out the wet acres. Only if Leah covers the insurance. She will. I put my fork down. Mom whispered, Wade. He lowered the paper. You're not going to let the policy lapse to make a point. No. I'm going to let the people who own the farm insure it. You have the money. So does the bank. Call them. The bank charges interest. I charge resentment. Eli rubbed both hands over his face. Can everybody stop talking like this is theoretical? If we pay the insurance ourselves and rent all the Voss ground, we don't have enough room for a bad spring. Dad said, Your sister could solve that. My sister already said no. Dad stared at him. It wasn't a dramatic defense. Eli didn't declare me an equal or apologize for the supper. He simply repeated my answer as if it counted. In our house, that was almost revolutionary. Dad pushed back from the table and walked out. The back door slammed. 3 seconds later, it opened again and closed gently because Mom had spent 40 years objecting to slamming. She watched it with tired eyes. He doesn't know how to do this without you. Do what? I asked. Keep everything going. That's not what he said 2 nights ago. He's proud. So am I. You don't ask me to shrink around it. Mom began clearing plates nobody had finished. I drove to June's with a notebook, coveralls, and the cracked steering hose still in my truck. She met me in the office and handed me a ring of keys. What's this? I asked. Machinery, fuel tanks, tool room. You decided I accepted? No. I decided an inventory requires access. You always this confident? Only when I'm right. We spent the morning opening panels, checking fluids, reading service dates, and arguing over what counted as preventive maintenance. June believed grease could solve most mechanical problems, and that anything it couldn't solve should have been built better. Her combine had a slow feeder house leak. The planter needed new gauge wheel arms. One tractor had mismatched batteries installed 3 years apart, which June described as a dealership romance. You can run this season, I told her, writing on the legal pad, but not if you wait for everything to announce itself with smoke. That's why you're here. I'm here for an inventory. You're correcting my maintenance schedule. It offended me. Sounds like management. Around noon, she brought sandwiches into the office. Ham, mustard, too much onion. We ate at the metal desk beneath the field charts. What percentage? I asked. She chewed, swallowed, and slid a sheet of paper across the desk. It wasn't a contract, just figures in her handwriting, hourly pay through planting, a bonus if downtime and outside repair costs dropped, and a share of yield above her 5-year average. You worked that out already? I've needed help longer than I've known you were coming home. The sentence carried no accusation. That made it sharper. I don't want to profit from weather, I said. You won't. We'll adjust against county average. You thought of that too. I farm for a living, Leah. I'm not playing bingo. I studied the numbers, fair wages, a measurable bonus, authority to make decisions inside an agreed budget. Nothing depended on affection, inheritance, or whether somebody remembered a promise differently. I'll do it through harvest, I said. June took another bite of her sandwich. We'll see if I can stand you that long. That's your version of congratulations? It's my version of a probationary period. We shook hands over the desk. The arrangement changed the shape of my days. I left before breakfast, worked at June's until late afternoon, then took 1 or 2 repair calls Danny sent my way. People paid me in checks, cash, and once in a frozen pork loin, I tried unsuccessfully to decline. At the Mercer house, my absence became the loudest thing in every room. Mom saved supper under foil, then made comments about food drying out. Dad began leaving equipment questions on yellow notes beside the coffee maker. I answered the ones involving safety and ignored the ones that were simply assignments. Check 7810 hydraulics. Price new planter monitor. Call Voss about drainage. On the 3rd morning, I wrote beneath the last one, Voss has a phone. When I returned that evening, the note was gone and Dad wasn't speaking to me. Eli was. He caught me on the porch and held out a beer. We sat on the steps while the yard disappeared into blue evening. The machine shed lights glowed across the gravel. I told Voss we'd take the north 160, he said. Dad accept that? No. Then what did Dad tell Voss? That we'd take all of it. I rolled the cold bottle between my palms. Which version did Voss believe? He told us to call when we agree. Smart man. Eli drank. Tessa thinks we should skip it completely. What do you think? I think if we don't grow, we fall behind. Behind who? Everybody. I looked toward the dark fields. That sounds like Dad. He's not wrong about everything. I never said he was. You act like leaving makes you the only one who can see clearly. I'm not leaving. You took your tools. I'm working 6 miles away. You know what I mean? I did. He meant I had stepped outside the arrangement that made his life function. He meant my refusal felt like movement even when I stayed close enough to see the shed lights. June pays me, I said. We can pay you. When? After harvest. For what role? He took another drink. Do I make decisions? I asked. Do I own anything? If Dad tells me to do one thing and you tell me another, who am I working for? It doesn't have to be that formal. It does when informal means Dad gets the final word and I get the final bill. Eli rested his elbows on his knees. I don't know how to fix this. That makes 2 of us. The porch door opened. Mom stood behind the screen. Leah, can I speak to you? Eli gave me a look that was half sympathy, half relief it wasn't him. I followed her upstairs. My duffel bags had been moved onto the bed. The toolbox remained on the floor, but Mom had folded my clothes into small, perfect stacks around it. I was trying to put things away, she said. You went through my bags. You're living out of them. They're mine. I washed everything. Some of it was clean. She stared at the folded clothes. I don't know how to have you here. The anger went out of me so quickly it left an ache. You could ask, I said. Ask what? What I want. Whether I need anything. Where my things should go. This is your room. It was. Now it's a guest room with my photograph in it. Mom sat on the edge of the bed. You used to come home and fit right back in. No, I used to come home and fix whatever was broken before I left again. You make us sound awful. I'm not trying to. You are. Every sentence is another accusation. I picked up a stack of t-shirts and put it back into the open duffel. Her eyes followed my hands. What are you doing? Packing. Because I washed your clothes? Because neither of us knows how to have me here. She stood. So you're leaving again. I'm moving to the weekly motel in town until I find an apartment. That place smells like cigarettes. Then I'll smell experienced. This is your home. You keep saying that like repetition changes ownership. Mom grabbed the handle of the duffel before I could zip it. Your father made one decision you don't like, and you're punishing all of us. He made the decision. You gave the reason. I told the truth. No, you told the version that lets you sleep. She released the bag. I wished I could take the words back, but not enough to lie. Mom's voice dropped. We never asked you to leave, Leah. I remembered her packing sandwiches the night Dad asked me to take my first deployment. Ham with mustard, too much onion. She had wrapped each one carefully and cried only when she thought I was outside. You didn't have to use the word leave, I said. You just kept telling me what would happen to the farm if I stayed. She looked as if I had spoken in another language. I zipped the first duffel. Downstairs, Dad's voice rose at Eli about the Voss ground. Tessa answered him. A chair scraped. The old house carried every argument through its walls and still managed to keep all the secrets. Mom sat beside the second bag while I packed. She didn't help me. She didn't try to stop me again either. She followed me downstairs carrying the pie. I had one duffel over each shoulder until the right strap found the damaged place and sent a warning down my arm. I shifted both bags to my left hand before anybody could notice. The argument in the kitchen stopped when I reached the bottom step. Dad stood beside the table with the Voss map spread in front of him. Eli was at the sink. Tessa had both palms flat against the table, and the insurance envelope lay between them. Dad looked at the bags. What's this? Luggage. I can see that. Then we're making progress. Mom came down behind me. She's going to that motel by the highway. Tessa straightened. The Hawthorne? It has a roof, I said. It has several kinds of mold. I'll request the quiet kind. Dad's eyes narrowed. You're being dramatic. I packed 2 bags and walked down a staircase. You come home for one day, don't get your way, and leave. I've been here 4. That's not the point. No, the point is, apparently wherever you move it. Eli pushed away from the sink. Do you want help with the bags? I've got them. His gaze dropped to my shoulder. You sure? Yes. Mom held out the pie as if it might settle the matter. At least take this. Tessa looked at the dish. That is still my Pyrex. For 1 second, all 4 of us stared at her. What? She said. This family has lost enough property this week. Eli laughed first. Mom tried not to and failed. Even Dad's mouth twitched before he remembered he was furious. Tessa took the pie from Mom, covered it with foil, and placed the whole thing on top of my toolbox. There, joint custody. Bad term, I said. Shared dessert. Better. I lifted the toolbox with my left hand. Eli reached for it, but I shook my head. Dad folded the Voss map. If you walk out every time family gets difficult, don't complain that you weren't here. That stopped me at the back door. I turned. He stood in the middle of the kitchen, broad shoulders bowed slightly beneath his flannel shirt. For the first time, I saw not only the man who had made the decision, but the man who had built his entire sense of order around people remaining where he put them. I was here when you asked me to go, I said. You're the one who decided that didn't count. Outside, the cold had sharpened. I loaded the bags, toolbox, and pie into my truck. Nobody followed except Tessa, who came out to retrieve her baking dish before I drove away. At the motel, the clerk handed me a brass key attached to a green plastic diamond large enough to serve as farm equipment. Room 14 had brown carpet, a bedspread patterned with orange leaves, and an air conditioner that sounded like it was chewing gravel. I put the pie in the mini fridge. The Pyrex barely fit. My duffels went on the luggage rack. The toolbox sat beside the television. I hung 3 shirts in the closet, placed my toothbrush by the sink, and lined my boots beneath the chair. When everything was arranged, I stood in the middle of the room with nowhere else to put my hands. I had slept in tents, barracks, shipping containers, trailers, and once beneath a disabled truck because the wind had made standing impossible. None of those places had felt as temporary as room 14. My phone buzzed. Mom had sent a single message. "You forgot your towels." I sat on the edge of the bed and laughed until I had to press my left hand against my eyes. June didn't comment when I arrived the next morning with motel coffee and the posture of somebody who had spent the night wrestling an air conditioner. She handed me a grease gun. "Planter first," she said. "That coffee machine at the Hawthorne dispenses a liquid with legal rights to the name. So you moved out. How did you— You smell like there's soap." I sniffed my sleeve. "That obvious? The Hawthorne buys it by the barrel. Warren used to bring home little bars after seed meetings. I made him keep them in the shop. We pulled the planter into the main barn. 2 gauge wheels had too much play. 1 closing wheel bearing was rough, and half the grease fittings wore hardened caps of dirt. I worked through lunch. June appeared at 2 with a sandwich wrapped in waxed paper. "I'm not hungry." "Then hold it until you are. I want to finish this row. You've been on that shoulder for 6 hours. I'm using the other one. You only brought 2. I slid out from under the frame. "You monitor all your employees this closely? You're my only employee." "That seems statistically irresponsible." She handed me the sandwich. "I hired your judgment. If you work until you're too sore to use it, I'm not getting what I paid for. I know my limits. So did Warren. That's why he had a heart attack beside a running baler and apologized to the paramedics for slowing them down." I looked at her. "He lived," she said, "that time." There was no self-pity in her face, only irritation at an old argument she had outlasted. I unwrapped the sandwich. June leaned against the planter. "Being useful is not the same thing as being indestructible. I never said I was. You don't have to. Your kind always lets the schedule say it." "My kind? People who think resting is something other people earn." I ate the sandwich to stop the conversation. It was turkey, Swiss, and enough horseradish to reopen my sinuses. "You trying to hurt me?" I asked. "I said I'd pay you, not coddle you." By 4, the planter had a repair list, ranked by urgency and cost. I was loading tools when Tessa's SUV pulled into the yard. She entered the barn carrying the empty Pyrex dish and a manila folder. "June," she said. "Tessa." They exchanged the wary nod of 2 women who had served on opposing church committees. Tessa held out the dish. "You left this at the motel office." "They called me because my name's on the bottom. I left it there on purpose, with a note that said, 'Return to Tessa.'" I was testing the staff. The clerk said you threatened to throw it away if she didn't call, testing her under pressure. June walked toward the office. "I'll leave you 2 to discuss kitchenware." Tessa set the dish on my tailgate. She kept the folder under her arm. "How bad is it?" I asked. "The motel? The farm?" She looked toward June's office. "Can we talk?" We sat in my truck with the heater running. Tessa placed the folder on her lap but didn't open it. "Eli and Wade paid the insurance this morning," she said. "How?" "They pulled from the operating line. That's what it's for. It means no Voss ground unless Wade borrows more. He shouldn't." "I know." I waited. Tessa traced a finger along the folder's edge. "I've been going through old entries. Why? Because I wanted to understand what you put into the farm." "Tess, I'm not building a court case. I know. I'm trying to figure out whether the money was recorded as loans, capital, gifts, anything. And mostly it was entered as deposits or family support. Some was used directly for equipment, so it never passed through the farm account. That sounds right. Right? Accurate. It's not right." I watched a crow walk across June's barn roof with something silver in its beak. Tessa said, "Did Wade ever promise repayment?" "Not like a bank. What did he promise?" I thought of Dad sitting at the kitchen table after the auger accident, his leg rigid in a metal brace. Mom had put a glass of water in front of him. He dragged one finger through the condensation and divided the wet circle into rough lines. "Every dollar is another row with your name on it," I said. Tessa turned toward me. "He said that?" "More than once." "Did Eli hear him?" The first time, yes. She looked down at the folder. It doesn't matter, I said. How can it not matter? Because I'm not trying to win the farm with old bookkeeping. Dad knows what happened, Mom knows enough, Eli knows more than he wants to. If they need a spreadsheet to believe me, a spreadsheet won't fix it. Tessa's expression tightened. You could at least let me calculate it. For what? So they can't call it nothing. They'll call it whatever lets them live with themselves. She sat back against the seat. That's a very military answer. No, the military loved paperwork. Her laugh came out reluctantly. I nodded at the folder. Don't hide things from Eli. I'm not. Don't use me to fight with him either. Her eyes flashed. You think that's what I'm doing? I think you're angry at him. I am. So be angry about what he did to you, not just what he did to me. She looked away. After a moment, she said, He let me believe the farm would belong to both of you. We made decisions based on that. I defended him to people who said he'd inherit everything. That's between you and him. I seem to have heard that recently. Annoying, isn't it? She tucked the folder behind her seat. Come to dinner Sunday. Mom asked you to ask? No. Eli did. That surprised me enough that she noticed. He wants to talk without Wade, she said. I'll think about it. He said you'd say that. He's learning. When I climbed out, a familiar diesel engine sounded on the road. Dad's pickup turned into June's lane, pulling the 7810 on the equipment trailer. June came out of the office and stood beside me. Dad parked, climbed down, and looked from her to me. The hydraulics are worse, he said. I left you a note. Your note said to call a shop. I'm a shop now. His jaw tightened. Fine. What do you charge? I told him. That's dealership rate. June pays it. June folded her arms. On time, too. Dad ignored her. When can you look at it? Monday afternoon. I need it before then. I have 2 jobs ahead of you. I'm your father. You don't need an appointment for that. His eyes narrowed. You need one for the mechanic, I said. For a long moment, I expected him to load the tractor back up. Instead, he reached into his shirt pocket, pulled out a pen, and wrote Monday afternoon on the back of a feed receipt. Then he handed me the tractor key. Don't lose it. I closed my fingers around the key. Wouldn't dream of it. Dad stared at my fist, closed around the key as if he had expected sparks. I'll need an estimate before you order anything, he said. You'll get one. And don't replace the pump unless you know it's bad. That's generally how estimates work. I'm serious. So am I. June stepped around us and inspected the tractor on the trailer. That the one with the new pump Wade bought from Larkin? Dad looked at her. Rebuilt pump. Larkin rebuilt it? He said his nephew did. June clicked her tongue. Which nephew? What difference does that make? One's a diesel mechanic. The other sells hot tubs. Dad's expression shifted. I asked, did it come in a box? A wooden crate? With a manufacturer label? Larkin said, which nephew? Dad glanced toward his truck. I'll find out. He left the tractor and took the trailer home behind an empty pickup. June watched until he disappeared onto the county road. You enjoyed that, I said. I enjoy preventive questioning. Is the hot tub nephew real? Both nephews sell insurance. I turned to her. She smiled. But Wade is going to spend the drive home thinking about it. Sunday evening, Eli texted me an address I already knew and added, Wade isn't coming. I arrived at 6, carrying a bottle of wine because motel life had stripped me of the ability to produce a side dish. Eli and Tessa lived in a brick ranch house 2 miles from the farm, close enough that Dad could see their porch light from the south field in winter. Tessa opened the door, took the bottle, and said, He's in the kitchen performing masculinity at a skillet. Something clattered behind her. I heard that, Eli called. You were meant to. He had made steaks, baked potatoes, and a salad consisting mostly of lettuce pieces too large to fit in a human mouth. Smoke hung near the ceiling. The vent fan broken? I asked. It's loud. That means it's working. I didn't want to listen to it. Tessa handed me a wine glass. You see what I manage. We ate at their small dining table. Without Dad at the head, nobody seemed to know who should start. Tessa cut her steak. Eli rearranged the salt and pepper. I drank wine. Finally, Eli said, "I told Voss we'd take all the ground." Tessa's knife stopped against her plate. "When?" she asked. "Yesterday. You told me you were calling him Monday." "I called early. You waited until after the insurance was paid." "I didn't wait for anything. You waited until I couldn't stop the payment." Eli looked at me. "This is why I wanted to talk. I am not the referee in your marriage." "No, but you understand the farm. So does your wife." Tessa pushed her plate away. "Thank you." "That isn't what I meant," Eli said. "It rarely is." He rubbed the back of his neck. Voss wanted an answer. Larkin was ready to take it. And Western civilization continued to hang in the balance, I said. "Can you not?" I set down my glass. "Why did you take all of it?" Eli looked toward the kitchen. The smoke detector blinked red overhead, patient and judgmental. "Dad said, if I'm going to run the farm, I need to stop acting scared every time there's risk." "Dad called you scared." "He didn't use the word." "What did he use?" "Timid." "Ah. Scared in a sweater vest." Tessa's mouth twitched, but Eli didn't smile. "I ran the numbers," he said. "If we hit average yield, it works." "If you hit average yield with no major breakdowns," Tessa said. "We fixed the combine." "We fixed one thing on the combine." "Mike fixed it," I said. "You paid Mike." Eli turned toward me. "You know what I mean." "Yes. I'm learning that phrase carries a lot of freight." He leaned back. "I thought you'd be here this season." "I am here. Working for June. She hired me." "I would have hired you." "For what?" "Operations, repairs, whatever needed doing." "Under Dad?" He picked up his fork, then put it back down. Tessa said, "Answer her. I can't remove him from his own farm." "No," I said, "but you can decide whether you're offering me a job or a place at the bottom of his chain of command. It's not a chain of command. Then why can't anybody make a decision he dislikes?" Eli's face tightened. "You think June is going to give you control because she wrote some numbers on a legal pad? She already gave me authority over the maintenance budget. Because she needs free labor. She pays me. We would pay you. After harvest. That's normal. For an owner." The word remained between us. Tessa reached for the wine. She filled her glass, then mine. Eli looked at his steak. "I never told Dad to cut you out. You didn't tell him not to. I thought it would work itself out." "How?" "When you came home." "I came home. You came home angry. I came home on Tuesday. I got angry at supper." He pressed his lips together. Tessa looked from him to me. "Tell her what Wade said after she called about retiring." Eli's eyes flashed. "This isn't helping." "What did he say?" I asked. "He said we'd see how long you lasted." "Lasted where?" "Here." The answer hurt in a smaller, meaner way than the inheritance decision. Dad had not merely judged my absence, he had prepared to distrust my return. "Why?" I asked. Eli tore the foil around his potato into a narrow strip. "He thought you'd get bored." "Farming? Being in one place. I spent 19 years trying to get back to this one. You re-enlisted 3 times." The room tilted, not literally, but enough that I put my hand flat on the table. "You think I re-enlisted because I couldn't stand Missouri? I think part of you liked being good at something that had nothing to do with him. That was true. It was also not the whole truth, and Eli knew it." "I was good at something that paid your machinery loan," I said. "There. Money again. You keep handing me the receipts and complaining that I count them. I stayed here with him, and I left when he asked." "He asked once." "Dad asked the first time. You asked after the fire. Mom asked when she needed surgery." Tessa looked at Eli. "She asked Leah to deploy." "She didn't say deploy," he answered. "No," I said. "She said somebody had to keep farming while she recovered, and if I stayed, Eli would have to take the factory job. Then she asked whether my unit still needed volunteers." Eli stared down at the table. I continued. The third reenlistment kept my medical coverage when the farm couldn't afford to insure me. The second came with a bonus Dad used for the grain dryer. The first happened because he said the farm needed 5 more years before it could support 2 families. You could have said no, yes. The simple answer seemed to unsettle him. I had said yes each time. That mattered. Nobody had forced me onto a plane. They had only placed the farm on one side of the decision and my life on the other, then praised me for choosing correctly until the choice cost them nothing. Tessa asked, "Did Wade ever tell you those years would count toward ownership? He said every dollar put another row in my name." Eli closed his eyes. "You remember," I said. "I remember him saying things." "That was a thing. He says things when he's scared. So do you." His eyes opened. For a few seconds, the only sound was the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Then Eli said, "I resented you." Tessa went still. He looked at me. "Every time you came home, people made a big deal. Flags at church, free dinner at the diner, everybody asking what you'd seen. Nobody asked what I'd seen. Nobody cared that I hadn't had a day off in 4 months. I cared. You sent money? I called. You called when you could. Then you'd tell me how to fix something from 6,000 miles away, and Dad would spend a week saying you were the only one who understood machinery. The words came faster now. I was standing in the damn shed doing it, but you were the expert. Then you'd leave again, and I'd still be here with him telling me I wasn't doing it right. His anger was old enough to have roots. "I'm sorry," I said. He blinked. "I didn't know he did that." "You didn't ask." "No. I thought sending the answer was helping." Sometimes it was. The admission cost him. Tessa reached for his hand. He let her take it. I said, "Your sacrifice doesn't cancel mine." "I know. Do you?" He looked toward their dark window. "I don't know what I know anymore." Nobody touched the steak after that. Tessa brought out a store-bought cheesecake, and Eli apologized for the salad. It was not forgiveness, but it was the first conversation we had managed without someone leaving before dessert. At the door, he walked me to my truck. "I'm not giving up the Voss ground," he said. "I didn't ask you to. You think it's a mistake. I think you rented acreage based on labor and money you don't have. I'll find both. That's your decision." He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. "You won't help. I'm already committed through harvest. To June." "Yes." His gaze hardened again. "That was fast," she asked clearly. I started to open the truck door. "Leah." I waited. "Did you really want the farm this whole time?" The question was so honest it almost made me angry. "What did you think I was coming home to?" He had no answer. Monday afternoon, I inspected Dad's tractor while June changed the oil in her grain truck badly and with enthusiasm. The hydraulic leak came from a split return line, not the pump. The replacement cost $48. I called Dad with the estimate. "That's all?" he asked. "That's all. You sure?" "No. I thought I'd preserve some uncertainty for family tradition." He arrived before I finished and stood outside the barn watching me route the new line. He didn't hover exactly. He occupied nearby space with supervisory intent. When I started the tractor, the hydraulics held steady. Dad climbed into the cab, worked the controls, then shut it down. "What do I owe?" I gave him the invoice. He read every line, including the half hour I had deducted because June interrupted me with a discussion about mousetraps. He pulled out his checkbook. "You didn't charge for the hose wrap," he said. "It was scrap." He wrote the full amount and handed me the check. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he nodded toward June's planter. "You getting that ready?" "Yes." "You'll miss planting at home. I'll be 6 miles away. Not the same." "No," I said. "It isn't." He folded the invoice into his pocket. "Your mother says the motel's not safe. Mom thinks mayonnaise left out for 12 minutes isn't safe. She wants you home. What do you want?" Dad looked toward the open barn door. "I want the tractor running," he said. It was honest, at least. I handed him the key. "Then we're square." He took it, but his fingers lingered around the metal. "Family shouldn't have to be square," he said. "No," I answered. "Family should know when it isn't." He drove away without replying. June came over holding a dripping oil filter in one gloved hand. "You fix the tractor?" "Yes." "He pay?" I showed her the check. She studied Dad's handwriting, then handed it back. "Good," she said. "Now stop looking like he signed a sympathy card." I put the check in my pocket. Across the road, the Mercer fields lay bare beneath the late winter sky. In a few weeks, Eli would plant more ground than he had ever managed. Dad would call that courage, and every problem would arrive looking ordinary until 3 ordinary problems met on the same day. I knew exactly how that happened. For the first time, it was not mine to prevent. The first ordinary problem arrived as rain. It fell for 4 days, soft and steady, turning low places black and shiny. The creek came up over its banks, swallowed June's bottom fence, then retreated with 3 feed buckets and a section of somebody else's gate. June walked her fields every morning in rubber boots, cutting handfuls of soil with a spade and squeezing them in her fist. "Another day," she said each time. The forecast showed more rain coming. Every farmer in the county began staring at the sky as if poor eye contact had caused the weather. Dad planted the East Mercer field the first afternoon the sun appeared. I could see dust rising behind Eli's tractor from June's north acreage. The ridges were dry enough. The hollows weren't. Each pass left dark ruts that would harden around the seed. June followed my gaze. "You want to go tell them?" "No, you're thinking loud. Dad hates losing a day. Everybody hates losing a day. He thinks the calendar is a personal enemy." June drove the spade into the soil again. The clod came up damp and heavy. She broke it with her thumb. "We wait," she said. That single sentence was worth more than the percentage on the legal pad. I had recommended waiting. June had listened. There was no speech about who owned the land, no reminder that Warren used to do things differently, no accusation that caution was fear wearing a sweater vest. We spent the day replacing opener discs and recalibrating seed meters. At 5, my phone rang. "Mom." I watched it until June said, "If you're waiting for me to leave, this is my barn." I answered. "Hi, Mom. Where are you?" "June's." "I know. Where on June's?" I looked around. "Emotionally?" "Leah. Main barn. Stay there." She hung up. 20 minutes later, her car came down the lane. She had 2 bath towels in a grocery bag and a casserole balanced on one forearm. June saw the casserole and whispered, "Should I evacuate? You're probably already listed as an accomplice." Mom entered the barn, took in the planter, my coveralls, and June's field chart spread across the workbench. "I brought your towels. I've been able to dry myself. You forgot these." "That was over 3 weeks ago. You like the blue ones." She handed me the bag. The towels smelled like home. Of course they did. June approached the casserole. "What's in that?" "Chicken and noodles. Are they apology noodles or persuasion noodles?" Mom looked at me. "Does everybody around you talk like this?" I select for it. "There's supper," she told June. "You're welcome to some. I accept all neutral noodles." Mom set the dish on the office desk. Her eyes moved back to the field chart. "You're planting here tomorrow?" "If the soil's ready," I said. "Wade says it is. Wade doesn't farm this ground. He says all the high fields are ready. They may be. He and Eli are moving to Voss tomorrow." I folded the grocery bag around the towels. "Okay. The south end is wet. Yes." She waited. I waited better. "Eli hasn't slept," she said. "Then he shouldn't operate equipment. He's worried. He rented a lot of ground. Your father pushed him." Eli signed. "You know how Wade is." June quietly picked up the casserole and carried it into the office. Neutrality had limits. Mom lowered her voice. "Could you at least go look? At Voss? Tell them where to start. Your father might listen to you. He didn't listen when I told him not to rent the wet acres. He might now. Because consequences have arrived?" Her eyes flashed. "Why do you sound pleased?" "I don't. You do. You've been waiting for them to fail. The accusation hurt because I had imagined it. Not the farm failing exactly. I had imagined the moment when Dad finally understood how much had depended on me. In my worst moments at the motel, I had pictured him standing beside broken machinery with no one to call. Imagination was not sabotage. It wasn't innocence either. I don't want them to fail, I said. Then help. I am not going over there so Dad can ignore me, get stuck, and make me responsible for getting him out. You always helped before. Before, I thought it was my farm too. Mom's face closed. I added, Eli knows that ground. He can decide. Your father won't let him. Then Eli's problem isn't soil. She looked toward the open barn doors. My truck sat outside with my toolbox locked behind the cab. A small magnetic sign on the door read, Mercer Mobile Repair, a name Danny had put on 36 business cards before asking whether I wanted them. You're using our name, Mom said. It's also mine. I didn't say it wasn't. You noticed. Her mouth tightened. I brought food and towels. I'm not here to fight. No, you're here to ask for work without calling it work. She turned toward the office. I should go. Leave the noodles, June called. They're neutral. Mom laughed in spite of herself, but tears rose immediately behind it. She wiped at one eye with the heel of her hand and looked annoyed by the betrayal. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to say yes. Those instincts had lived beside each other my whole life. Instead, I carried the towels to her car. At the driver's door, she said, Your father misses you. He knows my number. He doesn't know what to say. He could start with my name instead of writing it beside a bill. Mom looked down. He shouldn't have done that. It was the first time she had admitted even that much. No, I said. He shouldn't have. She got into the car and closed the door. Before starting the engine, she lowered the window. The motel really isn't safe. It's safer now. I fixed the deadbolt. You fixed their door? They took $10 off my weekly rate. Mom shook her head. You can't stop working, can you? It sounded less like criticism than worry. I'm trying. She drove away. June and I ate chicken and noodles from paper bowls in the barn office. The casserole was rich enough to lubricate machinery. Your mother cooks like she's expecting winter casualties, June said. She freezes everything. So did I after Warren died. Took me a year to realize I was stockpiling meals for a man who wasn't coming home. I stopped with my fork halfway to my mouth. June kept eating. What made you stop? I asked. Ran out of freezer space. That's it? No, but that's what happened first. Rain tapped once against the metal roof, then stopped. June looked upward. Your family going into Voss tomorrow? Probably. You going to watch? No. I saw the stuck planter before 8 the next morning. Eli's tractor sat in the south end of Voss with the rear tires buried nearly to the rims. The planter had sunk crooked behind it. Dad's pickup and the 7810 were parked on higher ground. A heavy chain stretched between them. I slowed on the county road. June's tractor and planter followed behind me. We were moving to her north field, which had dried faster than the lower ground. Dad stood beside the tension chain, waving Eli backward. I stopped. June pulled in behind me. By the time I reached the field entrance, the 7810 had taken up the slack. Dad was still standing inside the angle of the chain. Stop! I shouted. Eli's head snapped toward me. The tractor went silent. Dad raised both arms. What? Get away from the chain. It's rated for move. My voice came out in the tone I had used around people who believed urgency made them bulletproof. Dad hesitated, then stepped back. Farther. I know how to pull a tractor. Then why are you standing where the chain will cut you in half? His face darkened, but he moved. I walked the line. The chain was heavy enough. The hitch point wasn't. They had looped it around part of the 7810's three-point assembly at an angle that could twist the arm or send broken steel forward. Eli climbed down from the stuck tractor. Mud coated his boots to the ankle. I told him we should use the drawbar, he said. Dad answered from 10 yards away. The chain won't reach. Then get a longer chain, I said. We don't have one. I do. Dad looked toward my truck. Of course you do. I retrieved the recovery chain and 2 rated shackles. June remained by her tractor, arms folded, making no move to join the family performance. I handed the equipment to Eli. Straight pull from the drawbar. Dig out in front of the tires first. Lift the planter as much as the hydraulics will allow. The frame's bottomed out, he said. Then unload the seed boxes. Dad made a sound of disgust. That'll take an hour. Less time than repairing a bent frame. We've got weather coming. You have weather here. Eli studied the planter, then nodded. She's right. Dad kicked at a clod of mud. Everybody's right except the man who's farmed 50 years. You farmed 50 years because nobody let you stand next to chains, I said. June made a choking sound from the road that might have been a cough. We unloaded seed bags onto the pickup. I helped with the first 2, then my shoulder tightened. Eli noticed. I've got it. I can carry seed. I know. I've got it. This time, I let him. When the boxes were empty and the drawbar connection secure, Eli returned to the cab. Dad started the 7810. The pull came slow and straight. Mud rolled ahead of the trapped tires. The tractor rose an inch, slipped, then crawled free with the planter dragging behind it. Dad drove onto firm ground and shut down. Eli climbed out, mud on his jeans and sweat darkening his collar despite the cold. Thanks, he said. I began coiling my chain. Dad looked at June, waiting by the road. You planting? Yes. You decided your ground's ready? June did. She always was too cautious. She averages 6 bushels more than we do. His eyes narrowed. On fewer acres. That's still how averages work. Eli came over. Can you take a look at the planter frame? No. He stopped. I'm working, I said. If you want an inspection, call me and schedule it. Dad laughed without humor. You're already standing here. I stopped because you were doing something dangerous. And now you're going to leave us stuck? You're not stuck. The planter could be damaged. Yes. Mom's accusation echoed in me. You can help and you won't. I fastened the chain inside my truck bed. Eli wiped mud from his hands. What would you charge? Dad turned toward him. Don't encourage this. Eli ignored him. What would you charge, Leah? I gave him my hourly rate. Can you come after June's field? Probably around 5. Fine. Dad stared at us both. Eli took out his phone and entered the appointment. It was the first time my brother had asked clearly. At 5:30, I returned. The planter had a bent gauge wheel arm, but no frame damage. Eli stood beside me while I showed him where the force had traveled through the row unit. He listened without defending himself. Dad had gone home. When I finished, Eli paid me from his own checkbook. You don't have to do that, I said. Yes, he answered, I do. Behind us, Voss's South Acres glistened beneath standing water. Seed corn sat stacked in the pickup, waiting for ground that would not be ready merely because Dad had decided it should be. Eli tore the check free and held it out. I still think you should be here, he said. I took it. I am here. He looked across the field at the ruts we had left. This time, he didn't tell me it wasn't the same. The south end of Voss came up in stripes. Seed planted on the ridges emerged first. Seed pressed into wet soil appeared late, or not at all, leaving pale gaps between darker rows. Dad blamed the hybrid. Eli blamed the rain. Tessa blamed the lease, and Mom blamed everyone for discussing it during meals. June's fields emerged evenly enough that she walked the rows twice, looking for something to distrust. You seem disappointed, I told her. I don't like early confidence. The corn is 4 inches tall. That's how it lures you in. By June, the planter was cleaned, repaired, and parked. The tractors had service dates written inside their cabs. I had enough repair work from other farms to stop answering every call Danny sent, though he continued giving out my number with the generosity of a man volunteering someone else's time. I also found an apartment above the old pharmacy in town. It had 1 bedroom, a kitchen with slanted floors, and windows that rattled when grain trucks passed. The landlord had painted every wall the same shade of beige, including one light switch and part of a dead beetle. It was mine for 12 months. Mom helped me move without being asked. She arrived at the Hawthorne with cardboard boxes, cleaning supplies, and the blue towels. "You brought those twice," I said. "You need more than 2 towels. It's one body. People have guests, not with these stairs." The apartment sat above 22 narrow steps that turned sharply near the top. Mom climbed them carrying a box marked kitchen and refused to admit she was out of breath. Inside, she opened the box and began placing plates in the cabinet to the right of the sink. "I would have used the left," I said. "You're right-handed. The stove's on the left." She considered this, removed every plate, and moved them without complaint. That frightened me more than an argument. We spent the afternoon assembling a table I had bought second-hand. The instructions were missing, and one of the legs had been mislabeled with masking tape. Mom held the tabletop while I tightened bolts underneath. "Your father used to put every chair together backward," she said. "He still would if furniture had reverse. He's not sleeping. Neither is Eli. He worries about the Voss ground. He should." Mom pressed her lips together. "You don't have to enjoy being right." "I don't. You sound like June. That's probably occupational exposure." She steadied the table while I stood it upright. It wobbled. I crouched to adjust one leg and pain caught under my shoulder blade. Mom saw me stop. "Is that from overseas?" "Partly." "What does partly mean?" "It means I injured it there and kept using it here." "You said it healed." "I said I passed my physical." "That isn't the same thing." "No." She sat in one of the unmatched chairs. "Why didn't you tell me? You had surgery. Dad had the grain dryer torn apart. Eli was sleeping in the shed because the temperature monitor kept failing. That was after your 4th deployment." "Yes." Her face tightened as she counted backward through years she had once organized by planting and harvest. "You came home in October," she said, "for 11 weeks. Then you left again in January." "Yes, I asked whether your unit needed volunteers." I tightened the table leg another turn. "I remember." Mom stared at her hands. "I thought if you went, Eli could stay through spring. That was the idea. I didn't think you'd be in danger. I was fixing vehicles. Mostly I was in danger from coffee. You came back with your shoulder hurt." "I came back." "That isn't an answer." It was the answer everybody needed then. She looked around the empty apartment, the bare windows, the single lamp, the pie dish Tessa had given me as a housewarming gift after writing my Pyrex on the bottom in permanent marker. "I didn't know," Mom said. "You didn't ask." The words were harsher than I intended. Mom absorbed them without defending herself. After a moment, she said, "I thought if something was wrong, you'd tell me. I thought if the farm survived, it would be worth it." Neither of us knew what to do with that, so we went to buy curtains. By August, June's soybean fields closed their rows and the corn stood over our heads. Heat settled across the county in a heavy yellow layer. My repair calls shifted from planting equipment to air conditioners, irrigation pumps, and one manure spreader, whose owner described the problem as urgent but spiritually unpleasant. The Mercer corn, on Voss, never fully recovered. Some sections looked respectable. Others carried weak stalks and shallow roots where the spring ruts had dried hard. Eli worked around them with the stubbornness of a man trying to make effort contagious. He began calling me before problems became emergencies. "Grain cart tire has a split," he said one afternoon. "How deep?" "I can see cord." "Replace it. Dad says it'll run through harvest. Dad doesn't ride inside the tire." "Can you get a price?" "If you schedule me." "I'm scheduling you." It was clumsy, but it was clear. I inspected the cart the following morning. Both tires needed replacement. The unloading auger had too much play at the lower bearing, and the gearbox oil contained enough metal to sparkle. Dad stood beside the cart while I wrote the estimate. "You find one thing and make a list," he said. "That's how inspections work. The auger ran last year. So did the tire. We can't replace everything because it's old. I didn't say everything." He took the estimate and whistled at the total. "You working on commission for the parts store?" No, they'd make me dress nicer. Eli read over his shoulder. We should do the tires and bearing. The gearbox can wait, Dad said. It may. That means yes. It means machines don't sign promises. Dad folded the estimate into quarters and put it in his pocket. A week later, Tessa called and asked whether I would come to the farm for a harvest meeting. Am I invited as a sister or a consultant? Consultant. What's the rate? Your normal rate. Who agreed to that? Eli. Dad? Wade agreed not to leave. It was progress of a kind. The kitchen table held field maps, projected yields, delivery dates, and Mom's peach cobbler. Dad sat at the head. Eli and Tessa took one side. I sat opposite them with my notebook. Mom served cobbler before we started. It keeps people civil, she said. Sugar doesn't fix personality, Dad told her. No, but it slows your mouth. I looked at Mom. She shrugged. I'm trying something new. Tessa walked us through the acreage. The original Mercer ground would be ready first, then June's rented acres, she corrected herself to Voss's, and finally the late South section. Wade had committed a larger volume to the grain buyer during a preferred delivery window in exchange for a modest premium. How many days? I asked. 10, Eli said. With one combine? Unless we rent another. Have you reserved one? Dad answered. We won't need it. Tessa slid a page toward me. That's what I wanted you to assess. I calculated acres per hour, unloading time, road travel, expected downtime, and the fact that people became stupid after 16 hours awake. You can do the original ground inside 10 days if weather holds, I said. Add Voss and you need another combine or a custom crew. Dad leaned back. We harvested almost that much in 12 days 2 years ago. With me running nights, you're 6 miles away. I'm committed to June through harvest. June finishes before we do. Maybe. Weather doesn't respect payroll. Eli tapped the map. What if we start Voss first? The north corn may be ready. The south won't. We could blend moisture. You could. You'll lose time handling it twice and the buyer may discount. Dad waved a hand. We know how to harvest corn. Then why am I here? His eyes came up. Tessa cut in. Because we need a capacity answer. You need backup, I said. Reserve a custom crew now. You can cancel if you don't need them. That costs money, Dad said. So does missing the delivery window. We won't miss it. I looked at Eli. What do you think? He studied the acreage totals. I think we can do it if nothing major breaks. Tessa gave a small, tired laugh. Dad pointed at him. That's farming. No, I said. That's gambling with a machine you already know needs work. He turned toward me. Your job is to tell us how to make it work. My job was to tell you whether it works. And not reliably. Dad shoved his chair back. Then I guess June Bell bought herself an expert who only knows how to say no. Mom put down the cobbler knife. Sit. Everybody looked at her. Dad stared for a long second, then sat. Mom folded her hands. You invited Leah here because you wanted her judgment. You got it. Don't punish her because it cost more than agreement. The room changed by half a degree. Dad looked at Mom as if she had switched languages. Eli stared at the map. Tessa hid a smile behind her coffee cup. I closed my notebook. Reserve the crew, I told Eli. Replace the cart tires and lower bearing. If you choose not to, write down why, so you remember it was a choice. Dad said nothing. Eli nodded. I'll call tomorrow. He did reserve a crew, but Dad canceled them 3 weeks later when the corn looked strong and cash looked thin. Eli did not tell me until the reservation had gone to another farm. They replaced 1 cart tire instead of 2. The auger bearing remained on the list. At June's, we rebuilt the feeder house drive, serviced the unloading system, and stocked the parts most likely to fail. She complained about every dollar and approved each one. My shoulder worsened. Some nights I slept sitting against the headboard because lying flat made my arm burn. I told nobody, which meant June knew by Wednesday. You need 2 days off, she said. Harvest starts next week. That's why you need them. I can rest after. After is where fools store everything. She took the shop keys from my hand and sent me home. From my apartment window, I could see storm clouds gathering west of town. The forecast showed 5 dry days, then rain without a clear end. Eli called after dark. The grain cart auger started vibrating, he said. Did the bearing fail? Not yet. What did Dad say? That we can grease it through. I closed my eyes. You know better, I said. Yes. What are you going to do? On the other end, Wynn moved across the phone. I don't know, he answered. It was not my decision. That didn't make listening any easier. Shut it down, I said. He'll start it again. Then take the key. Eli went silent. You want me to take a key from Dad? I want you to stop running a failing auger before it folds inside the tube. He says it's just a vibration. He also said the shaft only needed polishing. Wind rushed across his phone again. I could picture him standing beside the grain cart, one hand over his other ear, looking toward Dad for permission to believe what he already knew. I'm ordering the bearing, he said. Order the lower seal, too. That wasn't on the estimate. You're opening the gearbox, replace the $8 seal. All right. And Eli? What? You're the one who has to decide whether he gets the key back. I ended the call before he could hand the decision to me. June made me take the next day off. I spent it at the Veterans Clinic getting my shoulder examined, then at my apartment icing it while trucks rolled toward the elevator outside my window. The doctor had used the phrase accumulated strain and asked whether I had been resting. I told her I had recently spent almost 8 hours doing it. She did not laugh. By the time I returned to June's, the weather forecast had tightened. 4 dry days remained before a wide green band of rain reached Missouri. We started corn at dawn. June drove the grain cart. I ran the combine. A retired trucker named Amos hauled to the elevator and communicated mostly through thumbs-up signs and complaints about younger drivers, a category that included everyone under 70. The first rows entered the header dry and clean. Kernels rattled into the tank. The yield monitor climbed above June's 5-year average, dipped on the East 40, then recovered. June's voice came through the radio. Don't start smiling. I'm not. I can hear it. You're driving behind me in a tractor. Confidence carries. We worked until the field disappeared into darkness. Floodlights turned dust into moving gold around the combine. The machines did what we had prepared them to do. That did not make the work easy. It made the hard parts productive. At 10, I climbed down to check the feeder house. My shoulder locked halfway through pulling open a shield. I stood still until the muscle released. June saw. We stop at 11, she said. We have another truck coming. Amos can tell him to go home. Rain's coming. Rain always comes. We can finish this field. We can finish it tomorrow with a mechanic who can still lift her arm. I closed the shield. You hired me to improve output. I also hired you through harvest. That requires you to survive Tuesday. She shut down her tractor at 11 exactly. Across the dark county, Mercer Farm kept running. I could see their field lights from the road as I drove home. Eli's combine moved slowly along the ridge. The grain cart sat near the trucks, its auger working without vibration now. He had taken the key. He had repaired it. A small piece of me relaxed. The next afternoon, Mom called while I was unloading beside June's grain bin. Your father says the buyer moved the delivery time up. Buyers do that when weather's coming. They have to deliver most of the contracted corn by Friday. What does Eli say? He says they'll make it. Then why are you calling me? Her hesitation answered. Mom, could you run nights after you finish at June's? No, you haven't even asked when they need you. I'm already working 14-hour days. You've done longer, not for free. The radio on June's tractor crackled. She asked if the truck was empty. I held up one finger. Mom said, Your father thinks you want him to beg. I want him to stop making you ask. He's under pressure. So is everyone harvesting. He's your father. And he has my number. I hung up before she could turn the sentence into something I would carry all afternoon. The call left me angry enough to rush. I climbed the combine ladder too fast, caught my right boot on the second step, and yanked my shoulder, grabbing the rail. Pain flashed across my back. I stayed on the ladder until the field stopped moving. June's tractor rolled up. She opened the cab door. "You hurt?" "No." That was not convincing. I pulled it. "Get down. We need to move. Get down before I come up there and embarrass both of us." I climbed carefully to the ground. June drove me to the edge of the field and made me sit in my truck with an ice pack. Amos took over the combine. He harvested at half my speed and double my satisfaction. I watched the machine move away without me. June leaned against my open truck door. "You think this crop knows your name?" "No." "You think it'll mourn if somebody else harvests it?" "He's leaving corn at the ends. I'll bill him for emotional damages." I pressed the ice against my shoulder. She studied me. "Somebody call from home? Mom wants me to run nights." "What did you say?" "No." "Then why are you working like punishment?" I looked across the field. June answered for me. "Because saying no feels like you stole something. I could help. You could also tear that shoulder and help nobody. They're against a delivery deadline. So are we. They need me." June crouched until her face was level with mine. "People who need you will take everything you don't price," she said. "That includes your body." Her words irritated me because my body agreed. We finished the field the next morning and moved to June's western acreage. 2 days remained before rain. At Mercer Farm, the combine's unloading system failed. Eli called just after noon. "It won't swing out," he said. "Hydraulics are moving, but the auger stops halfway. Any noise?" "A clunk when it reaches the same point. Shut the engine off before you inspect the hinge." I know you know. Do it anyway." He sent photographs. The pivot had shifted, likely from wear in the support bushing. It might have been repairable in the field if nothing had bent. "Can you come look?" he asked. "I'm in the combine." "How late are you running?" "Until June stops us." "Which means?" "I don't know. We've got one hopper full and no way to unload. Use the grain cart auger into the trucks. Dad says that'll take too long. It will take less time than waiting for me." Eli exhaled. "Okay." He didn't argue. That almost made it harder. At 3:30, my phone rang again. Mom's name appeared. I nearly let it go to voicemail. Then something in me answered. She wasn't crying. Mom's fear made her voice flat. "Your father fell." I stopped the combine. "Is he conscious?" "Yes." "Did he hit his head?" "I don't know. He says no." "Where is he?" "Machine shed. He was on the ladder getting a come-along down." "Is he bleeding?" "His elbow. He's dizzy. Don't move him. I'm coming." I radioed June. She asked one question. "Do you need me?" "No. Go." The drive took 7 minutes. I made it in 5 without remembering any part of the road. Dad lay on his side beside the workbench. Mom knelt near his shoulders with a dish towel pressed to his elbow. The folding ladder had fallen across a stack of buckets. A come-along rested on the concrete several feet away. Dad tried to push himself up when I entered. "Stay down. I'm fine. You're on the floor." I slipped, which means gravity still works. Stay down. I knelt beside him. His pupils looked even. He knew his name, the date, and where he was. When I asked who the president was, he said, "Unfortunately," which was close enough to baseline. "Any neck pain?" "No." "Back?" "My hip?" "Blood thinners?" "Aspirin." Mom answered at the same time. "He takes more than aspirin." Dad glared at her. She listed 2 prescriptions, neither a blood thinner. His dizziness eased, but when he tried to sit, his face went gray. "We're going to urgent care," I said. "I've got corn standing. You can discuss it with the doctor. I'm not riding in an ambulance." "Fine, you're riding with me." Between Mom and me, we got him upright. He leaned more of his weight on me than he would ever admit. My shoulders screamed. I kept my face still. Outside, Eli's truck came hard into the yard. He jumped out before it stopped moving. "What happened?" "Dad fell. I'm taking him in." He looked toward the field. "The combine's down too." Dad pulled away from me. "I can stay." "No," all 3 of us said. Urgent care took x-rays and sent Dad home with bruised ribs, a stitched elbow, and instructions to return if the dizziness worsened. Nothing was broken. Mom cried in the pharmacy aisle while waiting for his pain medication, then denied it when I handed her a tissue. When we returned to the farm, dusk had settled. The combine sat outside the shed with the unloading auger half extended. Eli had parked the grain cart beside it. Tessa stood at the kitchen door holding Dad's jacket. Mom guided him inside. I turned toward my truck. "Leah," Dad said. I stopped. He looked smaller with one arm strapped in a temporary sling. "The combine. I know. We need it tomorrow. I can inspect it after I finish at June's. We need you now." There was no please in it. No question. Just the old emergency wearing a fresh bandage. I came because you fell, and now you're here. Those are different things. His face hardened despite the pain medication. Family doesn't clock out in the middle of harvest. I'm already in the middle of somebody else's harvest. June can wait one day. No. You'd let our crop sit for her? I gave her my word. You gave us 19 years. The sentence surprised both of us. For 1 second, the truth stood close enough to touch. Then Dad added, "What's one more day?" There it was. Not gratitude, availability. Eli came out of the shed wiping grease from his hands. "Can you at least tell us what's wrong?" he asked. "I can inspect it tonight at my normal rate. I cannot repair it tonight, and I'm not moving June behind you." Dad laughed, then winced and pressed a hand to his ribs. "You're charging us during a crisis?" "I charged June before she had one. This is revenge." "No. Revenge would be lying about what I can do and letting you plan around it." Tessa stepped beside Eli. "Ask her properly." Dad looked at her as if she had struck him. Eli closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he faced me. "Leah, will you inspect the combine tonight and tell me what our options are? We'll pay your rate." "Yes." Dad turned away. The pivot bushing had failed. The auger support had shifted and bent the hydraulic linkage. I could repair it, but not before late the next afternoon. A mobile welding shop could come sooner if they had availability. The nearest custom crew had already taken another job. Eli stood beside me beneath the work light while I gave him the options. "The rain starts Friday night," he said. "So the forecast says. That gives us 3 days, if nothing else breaks." He looked toward the dark farmhouse window. Dad's shape moved behind the curtain, slow and stiff. "We need more than advice," Eli said. "I know. Will you come back?" I thought of June's western field, the crop waiting there, and the handshake over her metal desk. "When her harvest is secure," I said. Eli looked at the silent combine. This time he understood that my answer was not a threat. That did not make the corn any drier or the rain any farther away. I slept 3 hours, woke before the alarm, and drove to June's in darkness. Her kitchen light was on. She met me outside with coffee in a stainless steel thermos and a breakfast sandwich wrapped in foil. "How's Wade?" she asked. "Bruised ribs, stitched elbow, injured dignity. Dignity takes longest." She handed me the sandwich. "I'm not hungry?" I didn't ask. We reached the western field at first light. Moisture was higher than the day before, but within range. Amos brought the first truck at 7. By 8, dust trailed behind the combine, and the grain tank was filling faster than June could unload it. I ran hard without rushing. There was a difference. Rushing skipped checks, cut corners, and treated fatigue like disobedience. Running hard meant every movement had a reason. I watched the gauges. I stopped to clear buildup before it became heat. I climbed down, facing the ladder. 3 points of contact, no heroics. June noticed that too. "Doctor scare you?" she asked over the radio. "You did." "Good, I'm cheaper." During the first unload, I called the mobile welder. He could reach Mercer Farm by noon if Eli approved the trip charge. I texted the amount. Eli replied immediately. "Approved." "Thank you." Not Dad says okay. Not can you get him cheaper. Approved. At 11, Tessa called. "We need a written rate if June's crew comes over," she said. "You talked to June?" "She called me." I glanced through the combine window. June was driving beside me, looking straight ahead. When did she do that? Apparently, while unloading, she said she can spare the combine and Amos after your west field is finished, but you set the rate. That's her equipment. She said you manage harvest. June's face remained innocent in profile. I gave Tessa the standard custom rate by acre, plus fuel and trucking. Only after June's crop is secured. Eli makes field decisions. I make equipment and crew decisions. Dad doesn't direct anybody. Tessa repeated the terms. Yes, I said, all of them. Hold on. Muffled voices filled the line. Eli spoke. Dad's voice rose behind him. Mom said something I couldn't hear. Tessa came back. Eli agrees. Dad? Eli agrees. That was enough. We finished June's western field at 4:15. A narrow strip remained along the tree line, but the grain there was too damp and could wait through the rain without threatening her delivery schedule. June shut down beside my combine. You're sure? I asked. If I weren't, we'd still be moving. You don't owe them this. I'm not giving them anything. You offered before they asked. I have spent 3 years listening to people tell me what a widow should do with her farm. You think I'm going to let Wade Mercer decide what I do with my combine? No. Then stop making this about him. She climbed down and stretched her back. I'm doing this because it pays, she said. Because Amos wants the hours. Because I don't mind helping Eli. And because you gave me your word, then kept it when breaking it would have made your life easier. I looked away toward the harvested rows. June added, Don't get sentimental. I'll raise the rate. At Mercer Farm, the welder had repaired the bent linkage. The new pivot bushing wouldn't arrive for 2 days, so I machined a temporary sleeve from stock in June's shop. It would survive the window if Eli greased and checked it every 4 hours. I showed him where to watch for movement. Every 4, he asked. Not every 4 when convenient. Every 4. I heard you. You also heard me about the gearbox. His mouth tightened. Dad canceled the bearing order. Of course he did. The cart's running. Until it isn't. He looked exhausted. Mud dried in pale streaks across his jeans. His beard had gone past deliberate. I should have stood up to him sooner, he said. Yes. You could occasionally lie to comfort me. I'm trying to rebuild trust. That earned a tired laugh. We started both combines at 6 the next morning. Eli took the Mercer machine. I ran June's. Amos and a local hauler moved grain. Tessa managed the delivery sequence from the kitchen table and drove out with sandwiches every 4 hours. Mom stayed with Dad, though he appeared at the field entrance before noon wearing his arm sling beneath his jacket. He climbed into Eli's cab during a fuel stop. 10 minutes later, Eli got out. Dad remained in the passenger seat, visible through the glass, talking with both hands. What happened? I asked. He wants us to move to Voss North. The original ground is drier. He says the Voss corn is losing quality. It's not. I know. Then keep cutting here. Eli looked at the cab. He says the buyer wants those hybrids first. Tessa has the delivery schedule. I know. Do you want me to tell him? His eyes stayed on Dad. No, he said. I'll do it. He climbed back into the cab. A minute later, Dad opened the passenger door and came down backward, one-handed and furious. I walked over before he could step in front of a moving grain cart. What are you doing here? I asked. Farming. You're medicated and can't climb safely. I didn't ask for a nurse. Good. My rate is higher. He pointed toward the north. Voss needs to come out. We're finishing this section. That's my combine. Eli is operating it. On my land. Then discuss it with him when he stops. Dad looked past me at June's machine moving through his corn. She's charging too much. You signed the terms. Eli signed. Yes. He doesn't own it yet. The words carried across the field entrance. Eli had climbed down again. He stood beside the combine, close enough to hear. No, he said. Apparently I don't. Dad turned. What's that supposed to mean? It means you tell everybody I'm getting the farm, but I can't choose which field to harvest. I'm trying to save your crop. Then let me run it. You've never managed this much acreage, because you rented it and kept managing over me. Dad stepped toward him. Pain caught in his ribs and shortened his stride. but not his temper. You wanted Voss. I wanted the North 160. You signed the lease. After you told me I was timid, I told you to think bigger. You told me if I wanted the farm, I had to prove I could take risk. Then every time risk showed up, you called Leah. Dad's face reddened. A truck horn sounded behind us. Amos leaned out his window. You holding a family meeting or harvesting corn? Harvesting, I called. He gave me a thumbs up and pulled toward the grain cart. Eli looked at Dad. Go home. Let us work. Dad's mouth opened. Mom's car turned into the field entrance. She parked beside his pickup and got out carrying his pain medication and the expression of a woman whose patience had crossed into a more dangerous country. Wade, she said, get in the car. I'm not leaving. You can leave with me. Or I can tell everyone how you got dizzy in the bathroom this morning and tried to blame the shower curtain. Dad stared at her. I looked at the ground. Eli suddenly found the combine tire fascinating. Dad got in the car. For most of that day, nothing broke. We finished the original Mercer ground after dark and moved to Voss North at sunrise. The clouds had thickened, flattening the light. The forecast moved rain forward to late afternoon. Corn poured into the hoppers. Trucks moved in sequence. Tessa called from the elevator to say we were close to filling the buyer's contract, though the premium window had already narrowed. At 10, the grain cart auger began to shake. Eli saw it before I did. He shut down immediately. The lower bearing had failed, heat had damaged the seal, and the gearbox oil glittered with metal just as it had during my inspection. Dad arrived while we were pulling the auger assembly apart. You greased it? He asked. Eli didn't look up. Yes. Then why did it fail? Because grease isn't a resurrection. Dad looked at me. Can you fix it? I can replace the bearing and seal. The gearbox may run long enough if we flush it. How long? 3 hours. We don't have 3 hours. That's how long it takes. He turned to Eli. Use June's cart. June answered from behind him. No. Dad faced her. My cart is matched to my tractor, she said. We're not changing the setup in wet ground with weather moving in. We're paying you. You're paying for the equipment and crew I agreed to supply, not for every decision your anxiety invents. Thunder sounded far to the west. Dad looked toward Voss south. Weak corn stood beyond the low swale, its leaves turning silver beneath the wind. We need that field, he said. The ground won't carry both combines, I answered. It's been dry all week. The surface has. Those spring ruts are still soft underneath. We leave it, we lose the delivery premium. We already lost part of it. We could finish before rain. No. Dad stepped close enough that I could see the small white tape over the stitches in his elbow. You don't get to say no on my farm. I get to say no with my crew. They're not your crew. Amos leaned against his truck and raised one hand. She signs my timesheet. June lifted hers. Mine too. Dad's eyes moved between them. I'm not taking people or machines into that south field, I said. Eli can decide what he does with yours. Dad turned. Eli. My brother looked at the low field. The first drops of rain struck the dust on the tractor hood, dark circles appearing one by one. We stop, he said. Dad went still. You're quitting with corn standing. I'm stopping before we bury a combine. You let her scare you. No. I looked at the ground. I've farmed that ground longer than either of you. You planted it too wet. The sentence landed like a slap. Dad's face changed. You planted it. Because you called me afraid. That's no excuse. You always have one. Rain began ticking against the grain cart. Mom and Tessa had driven up behind Dad's truck. They stood near the field entrance listening. Eli wiped both hands on his jeans. The barn fire wasn't Leah's excuse either. Dad's head turned sharply. Eli's voice shook, but he kept going. I called her. I told her we'd lose the farm if we couldn't replace the combine. I asked her to take Kuwait. Dad said, we all made sacrifices. Yes. Then you used hers to disqualify her. Mom's face crumpled. Dad looked at me. You could have said no. That's what Eli told me. It's true. So is this. You asked because you knew I'd say yes. Rain tapped harder against the machinery. Mom stepped forward. I asked too. Dad stared at her. When I needed surgery, she said. I told Leah Eli had to stay for planting. I asked whether her unit needed volunteers. We were in trouble, Dad said. We were always in trouble when she left, Mom answered. That's why she left. Nobody spoke. The rain reached us fully then, cold and steady. Amos climbed into his truck. June headed for her tractor. Work ended not with triumph, but with people covering augers, closing hoppers, and moving equipment onto firm ground before the lanes turned slick. The South Voss corn remained standing. Inside the machine shed, water drummed against the roof while Dad sat on an overturned bucket holding his ribs. Eli stood across from him. Mom and Tessa waited near the workbench. I coiled an extension cord because my hands needed a job. Dad watched me. What do you want? He asked. The question came out angry, frightened, and late. I set the cord down. I want you to remember why I went. He looked toward the open shed door where rain blurred the fields we had managed to save and the field we had not. For once, nobody answered for him. Dad lowered his head. Rain blew through the open shed door and spotted the concrete. Behind us, the cooling machinery clicked and settled. I remember the first time, he said. His voice had lost its edge. You were at the kitchen table, he continued. My leg was in that brace. Bank called twice that week. I remember. I told Eli one of you had to stay. Eli nodded, and one of us had to earn outside money. Dad looked at him, then at me. Your unit had that opening. My unit had several openings. You asked me to take the one that paid extra. Mom sat on the edge of the workbench. Her wet hair clung to her face. Dad rubbed one hand across his mouth. I thought it would be one deployment. So did I. Then you were good at it. The sentence was almost an accusation. Yes, I said. You moved up. They kept calling. Every time the farm needed something, you had a way to get the money. No. Every time the farm needed something, you had a daughter you could ask. He flinched. I never forced you. I know. You could have come home. I kept thinking I was earning my way home. His face folded inward, not dramatically. Dad did not cry or apologize in a clean sentence. He sat on the bucket with rainwater darkening the shoulders of his jacket and looked like a man examining a machine he had damaged by insisting the sound was normal. I told myself you liked leaving, he said. Why? Because I needed you to. The honesty was ugly enough to be true. Eli leaned against the combine tire. You needed her to like it so you didn't have to feel bad asking. Dad looked at him. You asked too. I know. Mom said, so did I. Dad's gaze moved around the shed, searching for the person who had not participated. He didn't find one. I thought Eli earned the farm by being here, he said. He did earn something, I answered. So did I. I couldn't split the ground down the middle and expect it to survive. You didn't ask what I wanted. You decided what my work meant. You were gone, because you kept calling. The rain struck harder, swallowing whatever he might have said. June appeared at the shed entrance in her coveralls. Water's crossing the lane, she told me. We should move the trucks to the county road before we're here for supper. I'm coming. Dad lifted his head. Leah. I waited. I'm sorry. 2 words. No explanation attached. No demand that I accept them. I hear you, I said. It was all I could give him then. We moved the trucks. The rain lasted 4 days. Water stood across Voss South and pooled in the spring ruts. Wind pushed sections of weak corn sideways. By the time the ground carried machinery again, the buyer's premium window had closed. Some grain tested too wet and had to be dried at a cost that removed what remained of the lease's expected profit. The farm did not collapse. That mattered. Dad had always treated failure like a cliff. One wrong move and generations vanished over the edge. What happened was less dramatic and more expensive. The Voss ground lost money. The operating line stayed high. The grain cart needed a rebuilt gearbox instead of the cheaper bearing and seal it could have received in August. Several deliveries were late. No single consequence destroyed the Mercers. Together, they made the cost of every earlier choice impossible to rename. June's crew returned under the same written terms. Dad did not question the rate. Tessa paid each invoice within 3 days. When I repaired the grain cart, Eli stood beside me and did half the work. I billed half the labor. "You could have billed all of it," he said. "You did half. Dad would have billed all." I'm trying not to make that our standard. We harvested Voss South in cold November wind. The corn was lodged and slow. June ran the cart. Amos hauled. Eli took the Mercer combine, and I ran June's machine along the opposite side. At the end of each pass, I could see my brother turning beneath the gray sky. We met near the middle late on the second day. Eli climbed down and walked between the machines. "Dad says we should leave the lowest 3 acres, he said. "Smart." I told him that this morning. "What changed?" He walked the ground. "Miracles remain available." Eli smiled, then shoved his hands into his coat pockets. "I'm sorry," he said, "for the acreage, for letting you walk into that supper blind, for telling Tessa we'd own the farm together when I hadn't made Dad say it, for acting like your money was an insult every time it reminded me I needed you." Wind rattled dry leaves against the corn heads. "I'm sorry I treated answers like they were the same as help," I said. "I sent instructions because I couldn't stand not being here. Sometimes they helped." "I know. Still annoying. I know that, too." He looked toward the farmhouse roof in the distance. "I did think you wanted to leave," he said. "Not all the time. But I thought there was a part of you that was relieved when the orders came." There had been. Orders ended debate. A deployment gave sacrifice dates and a packing list. Farm duty had no boundaries, only the next emergency. Sometimes I was relieved, I admitted. Eli nodded slowly. "That doesn't mean I didn't want this," I said. "I get that now." He held out one gloved hand. I took it, expecting a shake. He pulled me into a hug. My shoulder hurt. I let it. Then June came over the radio. "If this is a reunion, charge it to somebody else's timesheet." Eli released me. "She's terrifying. She has canned peaches older than me." We finished all but the lowest 3 acres before dark. During the winter, I kept my apartment. I renewed my arrangement with June for another season and expanded the mobile repair work enough to hire Amos 2 days a week in the shop. He claimed retirement allowed him to choose better bosses and then complained about every task I gave him. Mom visited on Wednesdays. Sometimes she brought food, sometimes she brought nothing, which took more effort. She learned to knock and wait. I learned not to inspect every dish for a hidden request. Dad came once. He stood in my apartment holding the red toolbox because I had left it at the farm after finishing the grain cart. "You didn't have to bring it," I said. "Your name's on it." He set it beside the kitchen table. His gaze moved over the curtains Mom and I had chosen, the unmatched chairs, and the farm calendar June had given me. "I thought you'd move back," he said. "I might someday." "To the house? To the farm?" He nodded, as if those were separate things now. "Your mother told me about the shoulder. She wasn't supposed to. She worries." "So do I. I just have better jokes." Dad sat in the chair that wobbled. It rocked beneath him. "This leg's short." "I know. You can put a shim under it." "I know." He looked almost offended that I had chosen to live with imperfection. After a while, he said, "I want to change the plan." "What plan?" "You know which one." I pulled out the chair across from him. He spoke carefully. "Half to you, half to Eli. House included equally. Equipment, too." A few months earlier, the offer would have felt like victory. Sitting there, it felt like another decision Dad had made alone and brought to me finished. "No," I said. His face tightened. "No? I don't want half as an apology. What do you want?" "A working arrangement. That's what half means." "No, half means Eli and I can deadlock while you stand between us explaining what you would have done. I can step back. Can you?" He looked toward the window. I continued. "Eli has spent 20 years managing crops and daily operations. I'm not coming in and pretending that work disappears because you finally remembered mine. I want responsibility matched to authority. I want the North acreage and equipment operation. Eli keeps the home acreage and crop management. Major purchases, leases, and debt are shared decisions. You've thought about this. I had time overseas. Dad absorbed that. And you step back, I said. Not halfway. You can advise when we ask. You don't promise acreage, delivery volumes, or my labor. My labor, he muttered. Excuse me? Nothing. It sounded like an opinion volunteering for duty. His mouth twitched. What about the money you sent? He asked. I want it acknowledged, not repaid. That's a lot of money. Yes, we could work out. I don't want the farm hollowed out paying me for saving it. I want nobody in this family ever to call it help the military brought in. Dad's eyes lowered. I said that, he admitted, many times. I was ashamed. That doesn't make it smaller. No. He ran his thumb along a scratch in the table. Eli has to agree. Yes. And your mother? Yes. You're not making this easy. You raised me around machinery. Easy usually means somebody skipped a part. We met at the farmhouse the next Sunday. Dad did not sit at the head of the table. He took the chair beside Mom. Eli and I sat opposite each other with Tessa between us because she said someone had to prevent agricultural diplomacy from becoming a contact sport. We argued for 3 hours. Eli wanted final authority over planting dates. I agreed on his fields and refused on mine. I wanted a repair reserve protected from expansion. He wanted flexibility during low-price years. Tessa insisted neither of us could commit the farm to a new lease without the other's approval. Mom demanded that the house remain hers as long as she wanted it, which everyone had assumed, but nobody had said. Dad interrupted 7 times. The first 6, Mom touched his wrist. The 7th, he stopped himself. Nothing was signed that night. Nobody hugged. We ate reheated pot roast and revised numbers. It was the most honest family supper I could remember. By March, we had an arrangement all 5 of us understood. The North acreage and machinery operation became my responsibility and ownership stake. Eli controlled the home, acreage, and crops. Major equipment and the main buildings belonged to the operation we shared. Dad retained income while stepping away from management. Mom kept the house without conditions. June read the terms at her metal desk. You had a lawyer review this? She asked. Yes. Good. You could sound happier. I'll sound happy after you survive 1 season with your brother. I survived 19 years with the Army. Army had regulations. She was right. On the morning we started planting, Mom made breakfast at the farmhouse. Dad wore clean jeans and no work boots, a visible act of surrender. Eli came in carrying field maps. I had Wade's old leather gloves tucked into my back pocket. He had left them on my red toolbox without a note. Tessa poured coffee. Dad looked at Eli. You kept this place alive. The kitchen quieted. He glanced at me, then started again. Eli kept it alive here, he said. Leah kept it alive from everywhere we sent her. Nobody rescued me with those words. They did not return the years, repair my shoulder, or make the empty apartment less empty. They only told the truth. Sometimes that is the part people avoid, because it cannot undo anything. I put on Dad's gloves outside. The leather had shaped itself around his hands, not mine. Eli waited beside 2 tractors at the edge of the north field. The planter tanks were full. Morning light stretched across the rows, and the soil broke dark beneath my boot. You want the first pass? He asked. I climbed into my tractor. We split the field, I said. Meet at the far fence. He smiled and headed toward the opposite corner. Our engines started together. For years, one of us had stayed and one had gone because we believed the farm required the distance between us. Now Eli planted from the south and I planted from the north, each responsible for our own straight line. At the far fence, we met in the middle.